Chapter 5:31. Hua Yangzi knew very well that although Li Mu was young, he was a second-generation disciple of Fulu school and was above them in terms of seniority. However, Qing Xuanzi was also a core disciple that Xuanzong focused on. He hesitated for a moment and said to Qing Xuanzi, if you have offended Martial Uncle Li in any way, apologize to him quickly. I believe that Martial Uncle Li is a magnanimous person and won't make a fuss about it. Li Mu glanced at Qing Xuanzi. This old man was smooth and cunning in dealing with things. He covered up everything with one sentence. If he didn't let this matter go, it would seem that he was narrow-minded. However, Qing Xuanzi obviously didn't give Hua Yangzi any face. He didn't even look at him. He quietly put away his flying sword and flew straight to the celestial mountain above. Hua Yangzi looked embarrassed and said to Li Mu, I'm sorry, Martial Uncle Li. These young disciples offended you. I apologize to you. Li Mu waved his hand and said, this has nothing to do with you. You don't have to apologize. Judging from Qing Xuanzi's attitude towards Hua Yangzi, Xuanzong and Fulu school undoubtedly had a completely different sect culture. Fulu school attached great importance to seniority. Therefore, even if Xianjizi and Yuzenzi's cultivation had reached the transcendent realm, they still had to respectfully call Fu Daozi Martial Uncle when they saw him. Similarly, no matter how talented and strong the fourth-generation disciples were, they wouldn't be too presumptuous in front of the seniors of the sect whose cultivation was lower than theirs. Xuanzong obviously valued strength more. Although Qing Xuanzi's cultivation wasn't as good as Hua Yangzi's, he was also in the fifth realm. Moreover, he was extremely young and had unlimited potential in the future. When facing the seniors of the sect, he also had arrogance in his bones. It couldn't be said which sect culture was better. Fulu school respected the teachers more. However, Xuanzong respected strength and the disciples had a stronger motivation to cultivate. Perhaps this was one of the reasons why Xuanzong had so many powerhouses. After apologizing to Li Mu, Hua Yangzi quickly left. In the marketplace, many gazes were focused on Li Mu, and the sounds of discussion were endless. Even elder Hua Yangzi calls him Martial Uncle. He must be one of the second-generation disciples of the 5 sections. No wonder he's so wealthy and has a dragon as his mount. Qing Xuanzi really can't compare to such a status. At first, I thought that Qing Xuanzi was a refined disciple of a large sect. Now, it seems that this person is narrow-minded and irritable. What kind of treasure did that senior obtain just now? The discussions reached Li Mu's ears. Obviously, he couldn't stay there any longer. Li Mu prepared to go to the Fulu school's shop, but before he went, he stopped in front of a small stall. This stall was where Qing Xuanzi had snatched the spirit herbs and Li Mu had obtained the spirit bone. He reached out and threw a jade bottle to the stall owner, saying, refine it well. It's enough for you to break through to the transcendent realm. The stall owner was stunned for a moment. He opened the bottle and immediately smelled a refreshing pill fragrance. With just a whiff, his stagnant cultivation seemed to have loosened. He immediately put away the jade bottle and excitedly bowed to Li Mu. Thank you, senior. Li Mu waved his hand and left with Wan, Xiao Bai, and the other 2. The stall owner held the jade bottle tightly in his hand, his eyes full of gratitude. It was easy to find the Fulu school's shop here. The shops of the other small sects and clans only had 1 floor at most, but the 5 sects each occupied a large 3-story building. As for the Xuanzong school, their shop was at the center of the place. It was the most prosperous location, and it was 5 stories high. In front of the Fulu pavilion, cultivators lined up in an orderly manner. Fulu school's products had always been in short supply in the cultivation world. Li Mu walked in with the 3 girls. A cultivator frowned and said, why are they cutting the line? A Fulu school disciple looked up and immediately came forward, saying respectfully, greetings, Uncle Master. Inside the shop, several Fulu school disciples also quickly came forward and greeted respectfully. Greetings, Uncle Master. Greetings, Uncle Master. Seeing this, the people lining up outside the shop immediately stopped talking. However, they couldn't help but be curious. This young man actually had such a high seniority in the Fulu school. Li Mu waved his hand to the disciples and said, Go about your business. I'm just here to take a look. An elder led Li Mu and the others to the third floor. After offering them some fragrant tea, he respectfully retreated. Li Mu let Wan Wan and Xiao Bai rest here. He grabbed Cheng Xian's hand, and with a thought, the two of them appeared in the Demon Emperor's cave. A thin book with strange runes written on it floated in front of him. There was a page in the book. It was different from the other pages. It exuded a strange aura. It was of the same origin as all the pages of the heavenly tomes that Li Mu had seen before. He reached out his hand, and the page automatically flew out and floated in his palm. Cheng Xian picked up the book and flipped through it. She said in shock, "This really is the Dragon King's relic." The Dragon Clan's language was widely acknowledged to be difficult to learn. They often used a single character to contain a huge amount of information. Sometimes, they used many characters to express a simple meaning. Li Mu didn't understand the Dragon Clan's language. He asked Cheng Xian, "Who is the Dragon King?" Cheng Xian said, 8,000 years ago, he was a supreme master of the Dragon Clan. He once united the Dragon Clan of the Four Seas. He was the recognized king of the Dragon Clan. 8,000 years ago, a master of the Dragon Clan. Without a doubt, the Dragon King that Cheng Xian mentioned was one of the supreme masters that stood at the peak of the continent. Li Mu became curious about the relic he left behind. He asked Cheng Xian, "What's written on it?" Cheng Xian looked at the content on the page, and her face gradually turned red. Li Mu was speechless. "Why are you blushing? Hurry up and read it." "What does this line mean?" Cheng Xian lowered her head and whispered, "The taste of the Snake Clan's women is not bad. Their long legs are too clingy." She also said that she would call her sister over tomorrow. "I'm looking forward to tomorrow," Li Mu cursed in his mind. This can't be that dragon's diary, right? He didn't hear the secret information he wanted to hear. Li Mu continued to point to the next page. "What does this line mean?" Cheng Xian's face turned even redder. The Fox clan is really amazing in bed. It's a pity that her brother is a nine-tailed celestial fox. It's not worth it to fight with him. I won't look for her in the future. The books said that dragons were lustful by nature. Sure enough, this old perverted dragon actually wrote a book about love. But whether he should say it or not, the Snake Clan's legs were really clingy, and the Fox clan was really amazing in bed. Li Mu coughed lightly and pulled his thoughts back to reality. "What's next?" Cheng Xian continued to read with a red face. "I tricked a Xian ghost these past few days. She said that her physical body had already developed intelligence. I don't know if the two of them together—" "Stop, stop, stop. You don't have to read anymore." No matter how thick-skinned Li Mu was, he couldn't force a pure little female dragon to read such indecent things to him. That was too sinful. He looked at Cheng Xian and directly asked, "Apart from these things, is there anything else that's useful?" Cheng Xian continued to flip through the pages. Only when she flipped to the last page did she say, "Lord Dragon King said that he discovered a great secret hidden in the Dragon Clan's heavenly book?" Li Mu continued to ask. "And then?" Cheng Xian shook her head. "And then there's nothing else." This broken chapter dragon made Li Mu's heart itch. However, he didn't say anything. Li Mu could see for himself. The page in his hand should be the Dragon Clan's heavenly book. However, for some reason, the Dragon King didn't pass it down. Instead, he hid it in this dating diary. Li Mu scanned this heavenly book with his spiritual sense. However, this time, he didn't enter that strange world like he usually did. A strong rebound force came from the page. Li Mu grunted and took a few steps back. He swallowed a mouthful of blood that came back up. He was slightly injured just by trying to comprehend this page. This page of the heavenly book was obviously sealed by someone. As one of the most ancient races, the Dragon Clan had many strange and unpredictable supernatural powers. Li Mu thought for a while and handed the page to Cheng Xian. "Try to touch this page with your spiritual sense." Cheng Xian closed her eyes and opened them quickly. She shook her head and said, "My spiritual sense can't enter." It was the same heavenly book. Li Mu was hit by a rebound force when he tried to comprehend it. Although Cheng Xian didn't comprehend anything, she wasn't injured either. Perhaps it had something to do with her identity as a dragon. However, why couldn't she comprehend this page even with her identity as a dragon? Why did the dragon clan from 8,000 years ago cut off the dragon clan's inheritance? Li Mu couldn't speculate about this point. He could only put away this heavenly book first. No matter what, he had made a big profit this time. The heavenly book was a priceless treasure. Not to mention 5,000 spiritual jades, even 5 million spiritual jades or 50 million spiritual jades couldn't buy it. It was just that Xian acted too hastily just now. She might have attracted the attention of some people with ulterior motives. Li Mu looked at her and reminded her, next time you encounter such things, you must keep a low profile and make a fortune secretly. The fewer people who notice, the better. Xian nodded and said, I know. Li Mu took the book from her hand and said casually, oh right, teach me the dragon language when you have time. Xian looked at the book in his hand and gave him a meaningful look. Li Mu immediately explained, don't think too much. I'm not interested in the romantic history of your Dragon King. I just want to learn something new. We humans have an old saying, there's no end to learning. Once I learn the dragon language, I'll be able to discover this kind of treasure the next time I encounter it. Chapter 5:32. After leaving the Fey Emperor's cave, Li Mu took stock of his gains. Although he had lost a lot of spirit jades, his gains were also huge. Not to mention the heavenly book, even if Li Mu couldn't comprehend it, it would still be a priceless treasure. As for the Maha's successor, it was an even bigger surprise. Even when the 100 schools of thought were flourishing, the Mahist was not unknown. Although the cultivation of the Mahist members was not high, their mechanical techniques were too powerful. Even the top forces of that time had to avoid them. Unfortunately, mechanical techniques required large amounts of precious materials and spirit jades. Not to mention small forces, even ordinary countries could not afford them. Over time, the Mahist disappeared in the long river of history. Great Zhou was strong, and with the Mahist, it was like adding wings to a tiger. Li Mu was looking forward to what surprises this person would bring him. In addition, the clothes and accessories that he spent a large amount of spiritual jades on might not be worth it to others, but Li Mu bought them purely because he wanted the women around him to look good in them. He also felt that they were pleasing to the eye, so the spiritual jades he spent were not in vain. Of course, although it was not in vain, he still felt heartache. The spirit jades he had, other than his own meager salary, the Empress's reward, and the Phantom Princess's forced gift to him, were all used up. He couldn't just ask them for more. Li Mu also had a man's dignity. If they took the initiative to give it to him, then so be it. If they didn't give it to him, then Li Mu wouldn't take the initiative to ask for it. As a man, earning his own money gave him a sense of security. Leaving the 3 girls to rest on the 3rd floor, Li Mu walked down the stairs alone. Fulu Pavilion had a total of 3 floors. The 3rd floor was not open to the public. The 1st floor was for goods, and the 2nd floor was used to entertain important customers. Although there were many Fulu on the 1st floor, it couldn't satisfy everyone's needs. Some customers would ask for custom-made Fulu for special purposes. Of course, the price would be more expensive. When Li Mu walked to the 2nd floor, a Fulu school elder was receiving a middle-aged man in luxurious clothes. The middle-aged man was wearing a long robe that concealed his aura. The robe was filled with spiritual qi, and it was obvious that it was not an ordinary item. Judging from the style, it should be a product of the North sect. In the world of cultivators, those who were able to afford the ritual implements of the Northern clan were generally people with a certain amount of wealth. The middle-aged man gazed at the elder of the Talisman Amulet sect and said, "To tell you the truth, fellow Taoist Qingjingzi, I came here this time for the sake of requesting a creation talisman for my son. I only have this one son, and I hope that this talisman can protect him." Creation talisman, Heaven rank Fulu. This talisman did not possess any offensive capabilities, but it could regenerate severed limbs and regenerate severed heads. Even if one's heart was crushed, it would regenerate in an extremely short period of time. Having a creation talisman was equivalent to having an extra life. Currently, in the world of cultivators, only the Fulu school was known to be able to draw a creation talisman. Qing Jingzi revealed a difficult expression. He looked at the middle-aged man and said, "Fellow Taoist Shin, you also know that the creation talisman is a heaven-rank Fulu. Even in my Fulu school, only the headmaster and a few heads can draw a heaven-rank Fulu. Moreover, the failure rate of a heaven-rank Fulu is extremely high. Even the headmaster cannot guarantee that he will succeed." The middle-aged man said, "I am very clear about this point, or else I would not have come here. I have inquired about the rules of your school. We will prepare 10 portions of talisman liquid for the creation talisman, and we will also give you 100,000 spiritual jades as a reward." Qin Jingzi nodded and said, "There is something I have to say in advance. If the creation of the talisman fails, all the talisman liquid will be wasted. Out of the 100,000 spiritual jades, we can only return you 50,000. Although the middle-aged man felt the pinch, he also knew that in the world, only the Fulu school could draw a heaven-rank Fulu. Hearing this, he nodded and said, "I understand the rules of your school. I have already prepared the talisman liquid and spiritual jades." Qin Jingzi was about to put away the spiritual jades when he heard a voice. "Qin Jingzi, come here." Qin Jingzi looked back and immediately stood up. He jogged to Li Mu and said respectfully, "Uncle Master, what are your orders?" Li Mu brought him to the 3rd floor and asked bluntly, "Is this how you treat your customers?" Qin Jingzi was confused. "Uncle Master, what's wrong?" Li Mu said, "For a creation talisman, you want 10 portions of talisman liquid and 100,000 spiritual jades, and there is no guarantee of success. Do you think the reputation of the Fulu school is not collapsing fast enough?" Although Li Mu was not a businessman, he knew that this was not how business was done. Taking 10 times the materials and a high deposit, and there was no guarantee of success. Even the blackest workshop was not so black-hearted. If the talisman failed this time, who would come to the Fulu school to draw talismans next time? Wasn't this chasing the customers away? This person was so generous. If he could spend 100,000 spiritual jades this time, he might spend 200,000 spiritual jades next time. This kind of high-quality customer naturally had to be kept. Xian Jizi, the headmaster, was already useless enough. His own grand elder's lifespan was nearing its end, and the entire school could not even gather the materials for a single heavenly secret talisman. Li Mu even had to ask for help from the Empress and Huanji. If the ancestral court of Fulu school was rich enough, why would Li Mu put down his dignity to live off a woman? Qin Jingzi did not feel anything at all. He muttered, "But the rules of the school have always been like this." Li Mu did not say much to Qin Jingzi. He directly took out a sound transmission artifact and contacted Xian Jizi. Very quickly, Xian Jizi's voice sounded from the artifact. "Junior brother, have you arrived at Xuanzong?" Li Mu went straight to the point. "I'm currently at Fulu Pavilion in Xuanzong. I have something to ask senior brother." Li Mu told Xian Jizi the situation. On the other side of the artifact, Xian Jizi said helplessly, "Junior brother, you've misunderstood. It's not that we're deliberately making things difficult for customers. It's just that writing a heavenly secret Fulu is often 1 in 10. We can't guarantee success. Of course, if junior brother personally does it, it's fine even if you only take 1 set of materials from them." Li Mu thought for a moment and asked, "If I draw it, who will the spiritual jades go to?" Xian Jizi said, "According to the rules, 20% will be handed over to the sect. As for the rest, junior brother, you can handle it yourself." Li Mu decisively put away the sound transmission artifact and said to Qin Jingzi, "From now on, if anyone wants to draw a high-level Fulu, tell them to come directly to me." After saying that, he looked at the middle-aged man on the 2nd floor and asked, "Who's that person?" "He's so generous," Qin Jingzi said. "He comes from a cultivation family in Jing country. His family has a spiritual jade mine. No wonder he was so generous. So his family had a mine." Li Mu looked at the middle-aged man as if he was looking at a pile of spiritual jades. He walked to the middle-aged man's side. Qin Jingzi took the initiative to introduce him. "Fellow Taoist Shin, allow me to introduce you. This is Martial Uncle Ling Jizi." The middle-aged man immediately stood up and cupped his hands. "Greetings, Senior Ling Jizi." Although the person in front of him looked young, in the cultivation world, One could never estimate one's age based on appearance. Perhaps this person was already an old monster of unknown age. Li Mu smiled kindly and said, "Fellow Taoist Shen, there's no need to be so formal. Sit." After the middle-aged man sat down, Li Mu asked directly, "Fellow Taoist, do you want a creation talisman?" The middle-aged man said, "Yes. I'll leave this matter to your school." Li Mu waved his hand and said, "There's no rush. Let's talk about the price first." The middle-aged man was stunned for a moment and muttered, "Didn't we already talk about the price?" He complained in his heart. The price he agreed to just now was already the limit he could accept. If the Fulu school increased the price, he would have to seriously consider whether to buy it or not. Li Mu smiled and said, "It's like this. Although the success rate of creating a creation talisman is not high, the grand elders of my school have returned to the sect recently. If they personally do it, they won't need 10 sets of materials. 5 sets will be enough. In addition, the Fulu school has been entrusted by you to create the talisman. If the talisman fails, it will be the responsibility of the Fulu school. The 100,000 spiritual jades will be returned to you." The middle-aged man sat in his chair, wondering if he had heard wrong. Why did the Fulu school's price get lower and lower? Not only were the materials reduced by half, but if the talisman failed, the 100,000 spiritual jades would be returned. How could there be such a good deal? Li Mu looked at him and explained, "Our Fulu school is a famous sect. We won't take advantage of you. Since the success rate of creating talismans has increased, we naturally won't charge you so much talisman liquid and spiritual jades." The middle-aged man came back to his senses and immediately said, "Oh, will do as senior says." Li Mu thought for a moment and said, "I don't know if this fellow Taoist has any friends who need a creation talisman. After successfully creating the first Fulu, the success rate of creating the second one will increase. Therefore, we can buy the second Fulu at half price. In other words, for 150,000 spiritual jades, you can buy 2 creation talismans." Although the middle-aged man didn't need it himself, if someone could buy another one, he would save 25,000 spiritual jades. Thinking of this, he no longer hesitated and took out his sound transmission Immortal tool. He immediately said, "Old Ma, where are you? I have a good thing here. Quickly come to the Fulu Pavilion." In the Fulu Pavilion, 2 aristocratic family heads who had traveled thousands of miles from Jing country to Xuanzong happily gathered 10 portions of spirit liquid and 150,000 spiritual jades. They planned to buy a creation talisman each and give it to their family's younger generation to protect themselves. The Fulu school was indeed a Fulu school. They had visited all the shops here and only the Fulu school could accept the business of the heaven-grade Fulu. Li Mu personally sent the 2 big clients out and said with a smile, "Fellow Taoists, take care. In the future, let's work together more often. Our sect accepts all kinds of Fulu and will give you preferential treatment. The price is negotiable." At the staircase on the 2nd floor, Qing Jingzi revealed a smile and muttered, 150,000 spiritual jades. If we give Xuanzong 45,000 spiritual jades, we'll make a net profit of 105,000. Li Mu sensed that something was wrong and asked with a frown, "Why do we have to give Xuanzong 45,000 spiritual jades?" Qing Jingzi said, "Martial uncle, don't you know? All the transactions that our 5 sects conduct here have to be given 30% to Xuanzong. This is also because the 6 sects are from the same sect, so Xuanzong gives us preferential treatment. The other small sects, aristocratic family shops, and stalls outside have to give Xuanzong 40% or even 50%. Li Mu was stunned for a moment before he strode out of the shop and said to the 2 figures who were about to disappear, "Fellow Taoists, please wait." Chapter 5:33. In Fulu Pavilion, the 2 family heads returned to the shop and looked nervously at the spiritual jades returned by Li Mu. They asked, "Senior, if you think the price is too low, we can discuss it again." Li Mu returned the spiritual jades to them and said, "This is a new rule of our Fulu school. For valuable Fulu items of the heaven realm and above, after the writing is done, you must hand over the spiritual jades and talismans. This way, in a month, you can come to Great Zhou's Shendu to pick up the talismans." Hearing this, The two felt relieved and accepted the spiritual jades. They smiled and said, "That's good. We originally planned to go to Great Zhou's Shindu to take a look, so it's on the way." As they walked out of Fulu Pavilion, the two sighed in their hearts. Although they were both leaders of Dao, Xuanzong and Fulu school's attitude towards small and medium-sized sects and families was completely different. Xuanzong was high and mighty. Their shop was opened here, and every time they sold a product, they had to give 40% of the income to Xuanzong. Compared to Xuanzong, Fulu school treated them especially well, living up to its name as the leader of Dao. After sending the two off again, Li Mu finally understood how Xuanzong's magnificent mountain gate and the spiritual jade plaza outside were built. Including the other 5 sects of Dao, the large and small sects of Zhu province, the cultivation families, and countless rogue cultivators were all contributing to Xuanzong's construction. While most of the countries in Zhu province were still in a feudal society, Xuanzong had already taken a step into capitalism. He was the one who wasted his breath, and the one who was tired of writing talismans. In the end, he was actually working for Xuanzong. Li Mu felt a nameless anger rise in his heart. He angrily asked, "Does our Fulu school not have a mountain gate of our own? Why do we have to do business in someone else's place?" Qin Jingzi said, "This is sect master's idea. He said that White Cloud Mountain is a sacred land of the Dao sect and shouldn't do such unscrupulous things." Li Mu waved his sleeves and snapped, "Don't mention him to me. Xian Jizi, that prodigal son of a bitch. How many spiritual jades has he earned for others over the years, yet he can't even gather the materials for the heavenly secret talisman. How does he still have the face to be the sect leader?" Qin Jingzi silently lowered his head. He couldn't interrupt when his uncle master was scolding the sect master, and he didn't dare to interrupt. Li Mu scolded Xian Jizi and calmed down very quickly. It was understandable that Xuanzong would provide the platform and take a cut from the transaction. However, they were too black-hearted. 50,000 spirit jades were gone for no reason. Li Mu's heart was bleeding. He was both angry and distressed. When he walked to the first floor and saw the situation inside, he was even angrier. Although there were many customers lining up outside, there weren't many Fulu school disciples in charge of serving customers. There weren't enough people in the shop to begin with. The few disciples who were acting as temporary clerks were still gathered together and chatting happily. They ignored the customers and ignored them. A few customers came in and walked around. When they realized that there was no one to serve them, they turned around and went to other shops. Other than Fulu school, there were also people who were good at Fulu from various sects, as well as some mid-level cultivation clans. The mid-level and low-level Fulu they produced were also of good quality. People who wanted to buy Fulu might not only choose Fulu school. Most of these disciples usually cultivated in their sections. How would they know the ways of commercial service? It was unknown how many customers went to other shops because of their arrogant and rude attitude. Li Mu inadvertently glanced around and saw a familiar figure in the shop on the first floor. It was the stall owner who Li Mu had bought a large amount of clothes and accessories from. He was currently bargaining with a disciple in the shop. He looked at a Fulu and pestered the disciple, saying, "Give me a discount. 1,000 spirit jades is really too expensive. How about I buy 2 pieces and you give me a 20% discount?" The Fulu school disciple was unmoved. He said indifferently, "The Fulu's price is set by the elders. We don't accept any bargaining. If you want to buy, then buy. If you don't want to buy, then go elsewhere. There are plenty of Fulu on this street." The young man looked at the Fulu floating on the counter and hesitated for a long time. In the end, he decided to give up. Just as he was about to walk out of the shop, a voice came from behind him. The young man turned around and saw the young man who had thrown out 20,000 spirit jades standing behind him. After being stunned for a moment, his expression suddenly changed. He said, "Don't tell me you're going back on your word. Once a product is sold, it can't be returned unless there is a problem with the quality." Li Mu waved his hand and said, "Don't worry, I'm not here to ask for a refund. Come with me." With that, he turned around and went up to the second floor. The young man hesitated for a moment, but could only follow. When they reached the second floor, Li Mu sat down and said to the young man, "Sit." The young man immediately shook his head and said, "Senior, if you have something to say, I'll just stand and listen." Li Mu looked at him and asked, "What's your name?" The young man honestly replied, "I'm Ma Feng." Ma as in handsome horse, Feng as in wind. Although this person's cultivation wasn't high, he had a good business mind. Especially his mouth, it was simply like a lotus flower. If the disciples of the Fulu school were half as good as him, the Fulu in the shop would have been sold out long ago. Li Mu poured himself a cup of tea and said indifferently, "Ma Feng, that's a good name. Who is your master, and which sect are you from?" Ma Feng still didn't know why this expert from the Fulu school was looking for him. He didn't dare to hide anything and continued, "Senior, I don't have a master, nor do I belong to any sect. The reason I embarked on the path of cultivation was because I found an introductory book on qi cultivation at an old bookstall when I was young. I pondered on it blindly and unintentionally walked on this path." Li Mu looked at him and suddenly asked, "Are you willing to enter my Fulu school?" Ma Feng was stunned. As a rogue cultivator, he had no sect, no background, and no one to guide him in cultivation. His biggest dream was to enter a sect, but his aptitude wasn't good. Even small sects weren't willing to accept him. Entering one of the 6 Taoist sects was something he didn't even dare to dream of. After coming back to his senses, he immediately knelt down and said loudly, "This disciple is willing." Li Mu nodded and said, "Very good. From now on, you are a disciple of the 4th generation of the Fulu school." Ma Feng immediately took off a bag from his back and placed it in front of Li Mu. He said, "These are the spiritual jades that Martial Granduncle used to buy the Immortal clothes and accessories. This disciple will return them to you." He had seen what happened in the market and guessed Li Mu's identity. He immediately changed the way he addressed him. Li Mu waved his hand and said, "These belong to you. Keep them for yourself." Ma Feng put the bag back on his back and said respectfully, "Thank you, Martial Granduncle." Li Mu said, "Get up and talk. I have some things to ask you." Ma Feng stood up from the ground and said, "Please ask, Martial Granduncle. This disciple will tell you everything he knows." Li Mu said, "If you were to manage the Fulu Pavilion, what would you do?" Ma Feng was stunned again. "Let me manage the Fulu Pavilion?" Li Mu nodded and said, "You can speak your mind boldly." Ma Feng had a thoughtful look on his face. He was not talented, short, and ugly. Even those small sects didn't accept him. There must be a reason why this senior was willing to let him join one of the 6 Taoist sections. This was his chance. If he grasped it, his future cultivation path would be smooth. If he didn't, he might just be an insignificant rogue cultivator for the rest of his life. He took a deep breath and said, "Martial Granduncle, this disciple thinks that there is a big problem with the Fulu Pavilion now." Li Mu gestured to him with his hand and said, "Sit down and talk slowly." Ma Feng sat down and said boldly, "First, in the Fulu Pavilion, the attitude of the senior brothers towards the customers is too bad. We are not the only shop that sells Fulu here. Since we are the sellers, we have to prioritize the customers. Many customers are not treated in time after entering the shop, so they will go to other shops. In the middle and low-grade Fulu, the quality of our Fulu is not better than the other shops, but the price is too high and there is not much competition. This has caused a large loss of customers." Ma Feng observed Li Mu's expression as he spoke. Seeing that he was not angry because of these words, he continued to speak boldly. "Second, the selling method in the shop is too rigid. 1 Fulu is 100 spirit jades, 2 Fulu is 200 spirit jades, 10 Fulu is 1,000 spirit jades. There is no discount at all, so it is difficult to stimulate the customer's desire to buy. We should set up a variety of selling methods. For example, in the shop, if you spend 500 spirit jades, 50 spirit jades, 1,000 spirit jades, 150 spirit jades. If you buy 2 earth-grade Fulu, you will get 1 earth-grade Fulu for free." Li Mu nodded and said, "Well said, continue." Although he understood these things with his identity, it was not suitable for him to get involved in these trivial matters. He needed a capable assistant, and the young man in front of him was obviously the best candidate. His appearance was not impressive, but he was extremely business-minded. After receiving Li Mu's affirmation, Ma Feng became bolder and said, "The exchange in Xuanzong is only held once every 5 years, and it takes a large amount of our spirit jades. Why don't we set up shops in the sect, or even in the various prefectures of the Great Zhou, or in the various countries of the Zhu province? With the reputation of our Fulu school, business will definitely be 10 or 100 times better than it is now." At this exchange, loose cultivators and cultivation clans from all over the world will gather here. This is a great opportunity for us. We must let the Fulu Pavilion leave a good impression in their hearts. As Ma Feng spoke, he was no longer limited to the Fulu Pavilion, but looked at the entire Zhu province. He planned a path of continuous development for the Fulu school. 2 hours later, he was still talking non-stop. Xuanzong's location is not good. They are located in the easternmost part of the Zhu province. Many cultivators have to travel thousands of li to get here, and the divine capital of the Great Zhou is in the center of the Zhu province. If we can build a market like this in the divine capital of the Great Zhou and invite the various sects and cultivation clans to move in, we will only take 10% of the spirit jades. This will definitely attract everyone. Unfortunately, this will offend Xuanzong, and the Great Zhou court may not agree, although Li Mu also wanted to do this, and this would bring in a large amount of tax for the court. There was no doubt that this would cause Xuanzong to have no business at all. Offending the number 1 sect of Taoism, the strongest power in the Zhu province, was clearly not a good choice at the moment. We'll talk about this later. Li Mu stood up and gently patted Ma Feng's shoulder. "From now on, I'll leave the Fulu Pavilion to you." Chapter 5:34. Fulu Pavilion. Li Mu brought Ma Feng in front of Qin Jingzi and said, "This is Ma Feng, a new 4th-generation disciple." Ma Feng hurriedly bowed to Qin Jingzi and said, "Greetings, martial uncle." Now is not the time for the sect to recruit disciples, but the head martial uncle and martial uncle all had special privileges. Qin Jingzi was just surprised. This person's appearance was ordinary and could even be called ugly. His cultivation was pitifully low. Why did martial uncle make an exception and let him in? Thinking back to when he entered the sect, he had passed many trials and eliminated many opponents before successfully becoming a disciple of Fulu school. Li Mu continued to say to Qin Jingzi, "From now on, Ma Feng is the shopkeeper of Fulu Pavilion. You will assist him in managing Fulu Pavilion. The two of you will discuss the matters of the pavilion. If there is anything you cannot decide, then come find me." Qin Jingzi's face was filled with shock. He could not believe his ears. A new 4th-generation disciple had instantly replaced his position to become the manager of the Talisman Pavilion, and this caused him to be unable to accept it for a moment. But he couldn't disobey the orders of his martial uncle, so even if he was displeased in his heart, he could only nod and say, "Yes, martial uncle." Ma Feng took a deep breath and puffed out his chest. He said solemnly to Li Mu, "Disciple will do his best to not disappoint martial uncle." Qin Jingzi looked at Ma Feng with an unperturbed gaze. He wanted to see what ability this person had to be valued so highly by martial uncle. Even if he was dissatisfied, he still followed Li Mu's orders and cooperated with this person's actions. Ma Feng first found over 10 young and beautiful female cultivators in the market, and he used them to replace the few Talisman sect disciples in the pavilion before receiving the guests that came to the Talisman Pavilion. Moreover, he promised them that he would pay them 10 spirit jades every day, and they would receive a commission of 1 spirit jade for every 100 spirit jades they sold. He called these female cultivators to the 2nd floor and spent an entire 2 hours teaching them how to attract customers and how to promote the goods in the pavilion. He also made a decision on his own. If a customer bought 2 Earth rank Fulu tickets, they would get a Mystic rank Fulu ticket. If a customer spent 500 Fulu tickets, they would get a discount of 50 Fulu tickets. If a customer spent 1,000 Fulu tickets, they would get a discount of 150 Fulu tickets. Qin Jingzi wanted to stop Ma Feng several times, but seeing that Li Mu did not say anything, he forcefully suppressed this thought. He and the Fulu school disciple who had been replaced stood to the side and watched coldly. When this person's various mischievous actions ruined the Fulu Pavilion's business, martial uncle knew exactly what this person was capable of. Xuanzong's Taoist Exchange Conference, or Trade Conference, was held every 5 years and lasted for a month. It was a grand event in the cultivation world of the Zhu continent. During the conference, cultivators from all over the Zhu continent would travel thousands of miles to Xuanzong in the East Sea. Most of them were here to exchange for suitable cultivation resources. In the market, several men were walking together. One of them said, "Which one of you will come with me to the Fulu Pavilion? I want to buy some offensive Fulu tickets for self-defense." Someone beside him said, "If you want to buy low-rank Fulu tickets, don't go to the Fulu Pavilion. It's the same in other shops." The man asked in confusion, "Why? Shouldn't the Fulu school's Fulu tickets be the best?" The man said, "Low-rank Fulu tickets are not difficult. If Fulu school can draw them, other small sects and families can draw them too. There is no difference in effectiveness. Fulu school's tickets are more expensive. Moreover, the Fulu Pavilion's disciples are all arrogant. They don't even look us in the eye. If we enter the shop, no one will pay attention to us." After this person spoke, he immediately received the agreement of the people beside him. Brother Su is right. 5 years ago, I went to the Fulu Pavilion once. The disciples of these large sects are indeed very arrogant. I know of a small sect that also specializes in Fulu tickets. Their prices are much lower than the Fulu schools. Last time, I bought one from them. In these 5 years, those Fulu tickets have allowed me to escape death several times. I strongly recommend you go to that shop. All right then. If I can save some spirit jades, I also want to buy a magic tool. Just as the group was about to walk past the Fulu Pavilion, 2 beautiful female cultivators suddenly came up to them. They smiled and said, "Fellow Taoists, what do you want to buy? Our Fulu Pavilion has an event today. If you spend 500 spirit jades in the pavilion, you can return 50 spirit jades. If you spend 1,000 spirit jades, you can return 150 spirit jades." The smiles on the faces of the 2 female cultivators were extremely gentle and beautiful. The business of the Fulu Pavilion was closely related to their remuneration. The more customers they received, the more spirit jades they would receive. If rogue cultivators wanted to earn spirit jades to cultivate, they would have to risk their lives every time. How could it be as simple as this? In order to attract customers, they used almost all of their skills. The male cultivators originally didn't plan to come to the Fulu Pavilion, but they couldn't resist the enthusiasm of the 2 beautiful female cultivators and entered the shop with some reluctance. The situation inside the Fulu Pavilion was completely different from the last time they came. There were no longer stiff faces of the disciples of the Fulu school. Instead, there were beautiful female cultivators with sweet smiles. The 2 female cultivators first brought them to a resting area with tables and chairs. They poured tea for them and then asked with a smile, "Fellow Taoists, what kind of Fulu do you need? Do you need me to introduce it to you?" Sitting on comfortable soft stools and tasting fragrant tea, the male cultivators felt embarrassed even if they wanted to leave. One of the male cultivators' throat moved and he said, "I need some profound rank offensive Fulu." One of the female cultivators smiled and said, "Profound rank offensive Fulu. I recommend the Guiding Lightning Talisman, Fire Snake Talisman, and Icicle Talisman. The Guiding Lightning Talisman has a sale today. Buy one and get one free. The Fire Snake Talisman and Icicle Talisman can participate in the full discount." The man's companion tugged at his sleeve and said, "Buy one Lightning Talisman and get one free. This is much more cost-effective than other shops. I've used this talisman to kill several enemies." "You'd better buy more," the male cultivator immediately said. "Then I want 5 Guiding Lightning Talismans." The female cultivator smiled and said, "Do you also need other Fulu? For example, the Divine Travel Talisman or something like that?" The male cultivator shook his head and said, "No need. I don't travel often. I don't need the Divine Travel Talisman." The beautiful female cultivator said, "The Divine Travel Talisman is not only useful for traveling. When you encounter a strong enemy, this talisman can also save your life. Especially the high-rank Divine Travel Talisman. It can make enemies 2 realms higher than you unable to catch up." The male cultivator thought carefully and seemed to be convinced. He nodded and said, "Then give me 2 of the profound rank Divine Travel Talisman." They sat there and tasted tea. Soon, the female cultivator brought them the fulu they needed. The male cultivator paid the spiritual jades and put away the fulu. He said to the people around him, "Do you guys want to buy any fulu?" One of the male cultivators shook his head and said, "I want to buy a magic treasure. We'll go to the North Sex tool refining pavilion later." The female cultivator's expression changed when she heard this. She said unhurriedly, "Fellow Taoist, our fulu pavilion also sells magic treasures. Do you want to take a look?" Although the fulu school specialized in fulu, there were also elders in the school who knew how to refine tools and elixirs. In the entire fulu pavilion, fulu accounted for 70% of the goods, while elixirs and magic treasures accounted for 30%. The male cultivator said politely, "No need." The female cultivator did not give up. She smiled at him and said, "To be honest, if you want to buy earth rank and heaven rank magic treasures, I certainly recommend you to go to the North Sect. After all, the North Sect is a great tool refining sect. The quality of their high-rank magic treasures is unmatched by any other sect. However, if you want to buy low-rank magic treasures, our fulu pavilion is not inferior to the North Sect. Moreover, the price is half. If you buy one magic treasure in the North Sect, you can buy two here." The male cultivator thought carefully and his expression changed. He did not go to buy earth rank and heaven rank magic treasures. He could not afford those magic treasures even if he sold himself. Just as they thought, in terms of low-rank fulu, some small sects' fulu quality was not inferior to the fulu school. As for low-rank magic treasures, the fulu school would not be inferior to the North Sect. If it was not for the fact that magic treasures had to be produced by the North Sect, then it was not bad to use the fulu schools. Moreover, the price was much lower than the North Sect's, which made him very tempted. Originally, he could only buy one offensive Dharma artifact. Now, he could buy another defensive Dharma artifact. This was an irresistible temptation. He quickly made a decision in his heart. He immediately stood up and said, "Please take me to see the Dharma artifact," at the staircase on the second floor. Qing Jingzi and the other fulu school disciples looked at the bustling scene on the first floor. Their faces were filled with shame. In just 2 hours, the shop's turnover had exceeded theirs in a day. Qing Jingzi finally understood why his uncle master wanted to use this person to replace him. He was sincerely convinced and bowed to Li Mu. "Uncle master has a good eye for people. I admire you from the bottom of my heart." Li Mu waved his hand and said, "You guys go down too. See if there's anything you need help with. Don't just stand here." Including Qing Jingzi, all the disciples went down the stairs. In just a few hours, the shop's situation changed completely. Li Mu knew that professional matters should be left to professionals. Although Qing Jingzi and the other fulu school disciples were talented and had high cultivation, they were not suitable to sell goods. In terms of business in the cultivation world, the Talisman Charm sect was blessed by the heavens. As one of the 6 sects of Tao, it was a famous brand that had existed for thousands of years. Just its signboard alone was able to attract many customers. If it were to carry out some appropriate marketing methods and bring in some service and sales talents, then the Talisman Pavilion would simply become a large-scale spirit jade machine. Many businesses in the cultivation world were profitable. Not only Fulu School, but also Danding Sect, the North and South sects, large and small sects and aristocratic families. The cost of 10 pieces of spirit jade would be sold at least 100 pieces of spirit jade. With a little promotion, buy one get one discount, it would immediately become the conscience of the industry. But the spirit jade would be split with Xuanzong. The better the shop's business, the more Li Mu's heart would ache. But there was no other way. Although Li Mu also wanted to move the shop back to the sect and not give Xuanzong a chance to exploit it, before that, he had to make Fulu Pavilion famous. Xuanzong had his eyes on Fulu School's spirit jade, while Li Mu had his eyes on their influence. In the current cultivation world, only Xuanzong could gather so many cultivators in one place. Li Mu's purpose on this trip was to help Wan Wan untie the knot in her heart. He interfered in Fulu Pavilion's business, but he really couldn't stand by and watch. The higher-ups of Fulu School all had profound cultivation and looked down on merchants. But they never thought that without spirit jade, how could low-level disciples improve their cultivation? Without talisman liquid and spiritual medicine reserves, the elders of the sect were about to die. They could only watch helplessly. After all, they were also part of Fulu school. There were some things that Xian Jizi didn't have to worry about, but Li Mu had to worry about him. Fulu Pavilion's business was on the right track for the time being, so Li Mu didn't have to worry too much. He came to Fulu Pavilion's third floor. Wan Wan and Xiao Bai were playing flying chess, and Cheng Xen was watching from the side. Li Mu looked at Cheng Xen from afar and said, "Cheng Xen, come to my room for a moment." Chapter 5:35. On the third floor of Fulu Pavilion, Xiao Bai and Wan Wan were playing aeroplane chess. Occasionally, they would turn their heads to look at a room not far away. Cheng Xen and Li Mu's "en" and "ah" the sounds could be heard from the room. Dragon language was really difficult to learn. At first, they were curious and wanted to learn it, but because it was too difficult, they both gave up very quickly. In the room, Li Mu looked at the strange characters that Cheng Xen wrote on the paper and made strange sounds. Cheng Xen shook her head and corrected him, "That's not how you pronounce it. Repeat after me %." Li Mu imitated, %. No, it's %. %. Cheng Xen had to correct him many times before Li Mu finally learned this note. He had always thought that he was smart until he began to learn the dragon language. When he first learned the Xingua language, it was as easy as blowing off dust. However, the dragon language could not be learned in that way. It could only be taught by a dragon hand in hand and mouth. Li Mu also knew many Fey languages, but none of them were as difficult as dragon language. It made him wonder from time to time if dragon language was the language of this world. After learning for a while, he said to Cheng Xen, "Your language is too difficult. If you don't have anything to do tonight, you can stay in my room." With their cultivation, it was no problem for them to not sleep for a few days and nights. Li Mu was now very curious about the dragon race. The first thing he needed to do was to learn dragon language. The Xuanzong Exchange Conference would last for a month. Li Mu was not in a hurry to go back, since he had traveled thousands of miles to come here. In the next few days, he and Cheng Xen stayed in their room and didn't come out at all. They studied day and night. Fulu Pavilion's business was also booming. Among the 6 sects shops, only Fulu School was willing to lower themselves and truly think from the perspective of their customers. In just a few days, the Talisman Pavilion's reputation had spread throughout the market, and the number of customers was increasing day by day. Some customers were even willing to come here to buy low-level elixirs and magic weapons, instead of choosing the Danding sect and the North sect. Pill Cauldron Pavilion, Weapon Forging Pavilion, Spirit Array Pavilion. The disciples of the various sects clearly discovered that the number of customers in their shops for this exchange meeting was much less than in the past. After some investigation, they discovered that many of the customers had been led away by Fulu Pavilion. However, they didn't care too much about it. Cultivators prioritized cultivation. If it weren't for the sect's request, they wouldn't even bother to come here and waste a month doing business. The other sects didn't care, and Xuanzong naturally didn't care either. The better Fulu School's business was, the more benefits Xuanzong would reap. No matter how the other sects and clans competed for customers, Xuanzong would always be the final winner. A few days later, under Cheng Xen's tutelage day and night, Li Mu finally managed to reach a rudimentary understanding of dragon language. Of course, he was still far from being able to understand the Dragon King's diary. Today, there was a lecture by Xuanzong. Li Mu planned to go listen. First, he wanted to go out and get some fresh air. Second, he had received Xuanzong's invitation to participate in the lecture. For this exchange meeting, Li Mu was the only second-generation disciple of Fulu School. He still had to give face to Xuanzong. There weren't many people in Fulu Pavilion today. There weren't even many customers in the market. On the neighboring island, a large training hall was packed with people. Today, Xuanzong's experts would be lecturing here. They would also answer some questions about cultivation. It was possible that one sentence from them could save many people months or even years of cultivation. Even cultivators who came for business purposes wouldn't miss such a grand event. At the front of the training hall, there were several seats. Those seats were reserved for the seniors of the sixth sects of Taoism. Generally speaking, those who could sit there were second-generation disciples of the sixth sects of Taoism, Dongshuan's experts. Except for the young man sitting on the left. A few days ago, he spent a lot of money in the market and severely embarrassed Qin Xuanzi. Later, people began to inquire about his identity. They learned that he was the disciple of Fu Daozi, the supreme elder of Fulu school. Although his cultivation wasn't as high as Dongxian, he was a true second-generation disciple of Fulu school. He was in the same generation as the chief of the six sects. Below these seats, there were about a dozen seats, which belonged to some well-known cultivation clans and mid-level sects in Zhuzhou, as well as some Xuanzong disciples. As for the others, they could only sit cross-legged on the ground and listen. That's Master Xin of Jing country. The Xin family started with a spiritual jade mine. His family strength is no weaker than a mid-level sect. I heard that he bought a talisman of creation from Fulu school. A heaven-grade Fulu costs at least 100,000 spiritual jades, and he has to prepare 10 sets of talisman liquid. The Shen family is really rich. The six sects have to be the richest. Fulu school sells a Fulu for 100,000 spiritual jades, and he has to prepare his own materials. This is simply robbing spiritual jades. You can't say that. Who doesn't know that the success rate of a heaven-grade Fulu is extremely low? 10 sets of materials may not be enough to make one. Moreover, I heard that the rules of Fulu Pavilion have changed. The Fulu Pavilion doesn't accept spiritual jades before it's completed. It can be said that the six sects have a conscience. The crowd kept talking. When more than 10 young disciples of Xuanzong flew down from above and landed on their seats, the cultivators sitting cross-legged in the Taoist field were in an uproar. It's Qin Yunzi. He's only in his 30s, but his cultivation has already reached Dongxian. He's Xuanzong. No, he's the first among the fourth-generation disciples of the sixth sects of Taoism. He's bound to be the next sect master of Xuanzong. Although his cultivation was piled up by Xuanzong with a lot of resources, his talent can't be ignored to be able to push his cultivation to Dongxian in such a short time. Qin Qingzi, Qin Xuanzi, Qin Shuangzi, and Xuanzong's young geniuses have all come out. I really envy them. Each of them has amazing talent and has such a powerful sect behind them. Sooner or later, they'll become the strongest in the world. Amidst the discussion, Li Mu's gaze swept across the young disciples. When his gaze swept across a young disciple, he felt a sense of familiarity in his heart. That young disciple called Qin Qingzi gave him a sense of familiarity. However, Li Mu had never been to Xuanzong before, and he didn't know any Xuanzong disciples. He quickly searched through his memory, and soon, this person's figure overlapped with a shadow in Li Mu's memory. A few years ago, when Li Mu was still working in the North County, the wife of the Rat King under the White Demon King was once injured by a human cultivator. The human cultivator who injured the Rat King's wife was the one who killed Xiaobai's entire family. Xuanzong's Qin Qingzi looked exactly like that person. Not only that, but his aura also reminded Li Mu of the aura that remained in Xiaobai's grandmother and the Rat King's wife. Just as Li Mu confirmed this person's identity, a fierce shout came from a futon in front of the training hall. "Give me back my grandmother's life." A white figure flew up from the futon. The sword in his hand was already unsheathed, and the tip of the sword was pointed at Qin Qingzi. This sudden change immediately attracted the attention of countless people in front of the training hall. The cultivators in the training ground were extremely shocked. There was actually someone who dared to assassinate a disciple of the Xian sect right in front of the elders of the Xian sect. This kind of suicidal behavior could be considered crazy. Qin Qingzi and the other young disciples didn't expect this to happen. Facing that figure, the others didn't move. They believed that Qin Qingzi could deal with it alone. Qin Qingzi was stunned for a moment. When he came back to his senses, he unsheathed the long sword on his back and faced the figure. After a short exchange, he found that the beautiful woman's cultivation was almost the same as his. He was shocked and confused. When did he provoke such a strong cultivator? Facing such an opponent, Qin Qingzi didn't dare to underestimate her. He immediately used several of his most powerful spells. However, Facing his spells, the woman only cared about attacking and didn't defend at all. Every time his attacks landed on her body, they would immediately dissipate. After a short exchange, Qing Qingzi had already determined that the woman not only had a good cultivation, but also had a defensive treasure. He wouldn't be able to defeat her in a short time. Just as he was feeling anxious, the old man in the front seat suddenly stood up and snorted. He said loudly, "Who are you? How dare you come to my Xuanzong?" As soon as he finished speaking, a transparent giant hand appeared in the void and grabbed at the woman. Under the pressure of the giant hand, the cultivators with low cultivation suddenly felt like Mount Tai was pressing down on them. They found it difficult to breathe. Even the strong cultivators in the creation realm found it difficult to breathe. They were shocked by the power of Dongxian. Under the pressure of the giant hand, Xiaobai couldn't move. She could only watch as the hand grabbed at her. In the next moment, a figure that wasn't very big but made her feel at ease stood in front of her. Li Mu floated in the void in front of Xiaobai. He didn't do anything. The aura in his body swept out, and the giant hand collapsed. After a moment of silence, there was another uproar. Isn't that the senior from Fulu School? Why is he helping this assassin? Didn't you notice that this female assassin is the beauty who has been following the senior around? What's wrong with Qing Qingzi? He seems to have a death feud with this beauty. This is going to be interesting. The conflict between Fulu School and Xuanzong. As the crowd discussed in low voices, someone suddenly realized something and said in surprise, "The one who attacked just now was Senior Miao Yuanzi from Xuanzong. He has advanced to Dongxian many years ago. This senior from Fulu School is only at the 5th realm, but he blocked Senior Miao Yuanzi's angry attack so easily. It's unbelievable." Only then did the crowd realize this. They all looked at the figure floating in the void with shocked eyes. Among the disciples of Xuanzong, Qing Xuanzi's face was pale. If Elder Miao Yuanzi's palm strike had landed on him, he would have been seriously injured even if he didn't die. However, it was easily resolved by this person. Thinking of the conflict between him and this person, Qing Xuanzi suddenly felt a wave of fear. Li Mu slowly landed and looked back at Xiaobai. Xiaobai bit her lower lip and tears welled up in her eyes. She choked and said, "Benefactor." Li Mu held her in his arms with one hand and patted her back. He said softly, "I know. Leave the rest to me." Wan Wan and Cheng Exen also left the crowd and quickly stood beside Xiaobai. Li Mu waved his hand and a golden light shot out. Qing Qingzi suddenly felt his waist tighten, and he couldn't circulate his spiritual power. Then he was dragged to Li Mu by a huge force. At the front of the training hall, Miao Yuanzi looked at Li Mu with a gloomy face and asked, "What is the meaning of this?" Li Mu shook his wrist, and the bound Qing Qingzi knelt on the ground. He looked at Miao Yuanzi with a gloomy face and said, "You connived with your disciples to bring disaster to the great Zhou and kill my sister's family. What right do you have to ask me?" The two looked at each other, and the atmosphere was extremely tense. Beside Miao Yuanzi, a female cultivator stood up and said, "Senior brother Miao Yuanzi, junior brother Ling Jizi, let's sit down and talk. There may be some misunderstanding. The 6 sects are one family. Let's not hurt each other." The people of the Danding sect stood up. Miao Yuanzi's face didn't soften. Instead, he looked at Li Mu and said, "Junior sister Jade, you all saw it. Today, it was Fulu School who provoked you first. It wasn't my Xuanzong that was rude." Jade's son walked in front of Li Mu and said, "Junior brother Ling Jizi, let this disciple go first. If there's anything, we can talk about it slowly. After all, this was Xuanzong, and Li Mu wasn't an unreasonable person." He took back the immortal binding lock. Miao Yuanzi waved his sleeve, rolled up Qing Qingzi, and flew up to the Dao Palace. Li Mu followed with Xiaobai and Wanwan. Seeing this, Jade's son and the elders of the other 4 sects looked at each other and shook their heads helplessly. They also flew up. Even with the Xuanzong elders presiding, the training hall still became chaotic. What's going on? Xuanzong is a righteous sect. How could a disciple of Xuanzong do something like killing people? There must be some kind of misunderstanding. I also think it's a misunderstanding. The disciples of Xuanzong who stayed behind also sighed. Qing Songzi shook his head and sighed. I've already advised senior brother Qing Qingzi not to be too eager for quick success, but he just wouldn't listen. He likes to kill demons for their demon cores and souls. Now they've come knocking on his door. Although Qing Songzi deliberately lowered his voice when talking to his fellow disciples, there were nearly 10,000 people in the training hall, and many of them had high cultivation. It was easy for them to hear what he said. What? Qing Qingzi likes to kill demons? Isn't this forbidden by the big sects? Besides, the Great Zhou court doesn't allow this kind of behavior. Forbidden is forbidden. Killing demons isn't killing people. How could a core disciple like Qing Qingzi be punished by the sect for killing a few demons? So what that senior said is true. So what if it's true? So what if it's false? How can Fulu School's strength compare to Xuanzong? If you were Xuanzong's sect master, would you punish a core disciple for such a small matter and damage the sect's reputation? Hearing the discussion, a Xuanzong female disciple glared at Qing Songzi and said, Qing Songzi, can you shut your mouth? Qing Songzi said innocently, I'm just doing this for senior brother Qing Qingzi's sake. Let's go up and take a look. I don't know how the sect master will punish senior brother Qing Qingzi. Chapter 5:36. Xuanzong. There were 9 peaks hanging upside down above the East Sea. In the Taoist palace on the 9th peak, the elders of the 6 Taoist sects had gathered. A middle-aged man dressed in colorful robes looked at Qing Qingzi and asked, Qing Qingzi, is it like what Marshal Granduncle Ling Jizi said, that you have committed such evil deeds in the North County? Qing Qingzi stood in the hall and said loudly, Sect Master, this lady must have mistaken me for someone else. I have never been to the North County, and it is impossible for me to kill her clan. I am innocent. The Xuanzong sect master, Miao Yunzi, waved his wide sleeves and said, I believe that junior brother Ling Jizi would not speak without thinking. Your words alone are not enough to convince others. Miao Yuan, take him to Discipline Peak. Whether he is lying or not, the discipline elder will find out. After saying that, he looked at Li Mu and asked, Is junior brother Ling Jizi satisfied with this? At least so far, as the Xuanzong sect master and a 7th realm expert, Miao Yunzi had shown enough sincerity. He did not protect the disciples of the sect, but dealt with them according to the rules of the Xuanzong sect. Li Mu had no objections to this. He held Xiaobai's hand and gave her a comforting look. After Qing Qingzi was taken away, the atmosphere in the Taoist palace was gloomy. Jade Sun took the initiative to speak and said with a smile, It has only been a year since we parted in the Demon Nation, but junior brother Ling Jizi's cultivation has already reached the peak of the creation realm. It really makes me feel ashamed. I'm afraid that Fulu School will have another expert soon. Li Mu had a good impression of this senior sister of the Danding sect. He smiled and said, I just encountered some opportunities. Jade Sun said, Junior brother, there is no need to be humble. As cultivators, opportunities and talent are indispensable. The so-called opportunities are also strength. Inside the Taoist palace, while Li Mu and Jade Sun were chatting, Qing Qingzi's face was pale and his body was trembling slightly in Xuanzong Discipline Peak. Standing in front of him was not only the Discipline Peak elder, but there were also 2 martial granduncles of the Miao generation and 2 grand elders of the Dao generation. Besides the sect master, Xuanzong's 7th realm elders were all here. An old man with a face full of wrinkles, white eyebrows, and a white beard said with a gloomy expression, Such a thing actually happened during the exchange that occurs once every 5 years. Does the Talisman Puppet sect even respect my profound sect? The other old man next to him narrowed his eyes and said, Maybe they think that because Fulu School has a 4th transcendent cultivator, they can compare to Xuanzong. If I remember correctly, the 2 from Fulu School have less than 2 years left. In 2 years, Fulu School will be the weakest of the 6 sects. They can't even compare to Danding sect and Spirit Formation sect. Only Taoist Miao Dun looked at Qing Qingzi and asked seriously, Did you really kill that fox demon? Qing Qingzi knew that he couldn't hide it in front of these elders. He said regretfully, I didn't know that the fox demon was the sister of the Fulu School's martial granduncles. Taoist Miao Dun said angrily, I didn't expect you to do such a thing. Come, let's go see the sect master. Elder Bai Mei looked at Taoist Miao Dun and said, Wait. Taoist Miao Dun frowned and said, "Martial uncle, Qing Qingzi violated the sect rules." Elder Bai Mei looked at her and said, "In the Miao generation, your talent is second only to your senior brother. Now, even Miao Xian and Fulu School's Yuzhen have already transcended. But you're still in Dongxian. Stay in the sect and cultivate. Break through as soon as possible. Don't worry about anything else." "Martial uncle, you can leave." Taoist Miao Dun looked at Elder Bai Mei. After taking a deep breath, she bowed and said, "This disciple will take her leave." After she left, Elder Bai Mei glanced at Qing Qingzi and said, "It's just killing a few demons. Those who are not of our race must have a different heart. The great Zhou court is muddle-headed and treats demons as common people. Sooner or later, they will be harmed. Now that all the cultivators in Zhu province are gathered here, if we punish a Xuanzong disciple for a few demons, won't we, Xuanzong, be ridiculed by all the cultivators in the world?" Qing Qingzi was overjoyed. Since the Grand Elder said so, he had nothing to worry about. The other Xuanzong elders also fell into deep thought. The Grand Elder's words made sense. If it were any other time, given the relationship between Fulu School and Xuanzong, an ordinary Xuanzong disciple would probably be expelled from the sect for committing such a big mistake. Even a fourth-generation core disciple like Qing Qingzi would be severely punished. But now it was the quinquennial Taoist exchange. All the Taoist cultivators in Zhu province were gathered in Xuanzong. If this matter were to spread, it would damage Xuanzong's reputation. As the top sect of Taoism, Xuanzong's reputation was much more important than a fourth-generation disciple. Elder Bai Mei looked coldly at Qing Qingzi and said, "From now on, you are not allowed to leave the sect until you reach Dongxian." Qing Qingzi had just reached the fifth realm. Although he could enjoy a lot of resources in the sect, he did not know how long it would take for him to reach the sixth realm. Although he was unwilling, he could only bow and say respectfully, "As the Grand Elder commands." Xuanzong, Peak Taoist Palace. Li Mu was still talking with Jade Sun when Miao Yuanzi flew in alone. Miao Yunzi asked, "What's the result?" Miao Yuanzi cupped his fists and said, "Sect Master Senior Brother, just now at Discipline Peak, Grand Elder personally performed a soul search on Qing Qingzi. This matter is indeed not his doing. There should be a misunderstanding." Miao Yunzi frowned imperceptibly and asked, "What about Qing Qingzi?" Miao Yuanzi said, "Although this matter was not done by Qing Qingzi, as a disciple of Xuanzong, he embarrassed Xuanzong in front of so many Taoist cultivators. Uncle Master has already punished him to face the wall in seclusion. He is not allowed to come out for 10 years. The four elders of Danding sect, Spirit Array sect, and the South and North sects heard Miao Yuanzi's words and their expressions changed subtly. Miao Yunzi was silent for a moment and said, "I'll go see the Grand Elder." An old man floated in from outside and said lightly, "No need. If you want to see this old man, you can say it here." Miao Yunzi cupped his fists and said, "Greetings, Uncle Master." Jade Sun and the others also bowed and saluted, "Greetings, Uncle Master Dao Qingzi." Today's Xuanzong, the Taoist names of the first to fourth generation disciples were Dao, Miao, Hua, and Qing. Dao Qingzi was a famous Taoist powerhouse who was one generation higher than the six sect masters. Miao Yunzi looked at the white-browed old man and asked, "Uncle Master, Qing Qingzi." The white-browed old man said, "I've already punished Qing Qingzi. How did you become the sect master? When your master was still in power, Xuanzong was so powerful. In your generation, you were framed, and you didn't even protect your own disciple. If senior brother knew about this in the underworld, I'm afraid he would doubt his original decision and regret passing the position of sect master to you." After reprimanding Miao Yunzi, he looked at Li Mu and said in a deep voice, "You insulted my Xuanzong. For the sake of the Fulu school, I won't argue with a junior like you this time. If there's a next time, I'll destroy your cultivation and let Xian Jizi come to Penglai Mountain personally to take you back." As his voice fell, he flicked his sleeves and left. Inside the Dao Palace, Miao Yunzi's expression was complicated. He looked at Li Mu and his lips moved. "Junior brother," Li Mu smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist, there's no need to say more. Since it's a misunderstanding, I apologize to Xuanzong for my impulse just now. Goodbye. After that, he held Xiao Bai's hand and strode out of the Dao Palace. Miao Yunzi looked at Li Mu's back and sighed softly. One called him junior brother, and the other called him fellow Taoist. This change in address indicated that the relationship between Xuanzong and the Fulu school could no longer be the same as before. Outside the Dao Palace, many Xuanzong disciples stood in the distance with different expressions. Some looked ashamed, some looked smug. Qing Xuanzi's face lit up with joy. He looked at Li Mu with a mocking expression and snorted, "So what if you're a second-generation disciple of the Fulu school? You're only asking for humiliation if you try to provoke the dignity of Xuanzong." As Li Mu flew down, a figure flew from behind. Jade's son flew to his side and comforted him. "Junior brother, don't be impulsive. This is Xuanzong. You're alone and weak. Once you're impulsive, you'll be bullied by them." Li Mu smiled and said, "Thank you for your reminder, senior sister. I won't be impulsive." Looking at Li Mu's back, Jade's son thought for a moment and took out a sound transmission instrument. After hesitating for a long time, she injected her spiritual energy. A white light flashed on the instrument. Jade's son took a deep breath and whispered a few words into the instrument. At the entrance of the Fulu pavilion, Xiaobai bit her lips and wiped her tears. She looked up at Li Mu and said, "Benefactor, I won't take revenge." Li Mu reached out and held her face. He wiped away her tears and said softly, "I promise you, I'll let you kill your enemy and avenge your grandmother and your clan." He looked up at the countless mountains floating in the sky and a smile appeared on his face. He said lightly, "Xuanzong." The sound transmission instrument in the storage space vibrated. Li Mu took out an object and said calmly, "Senior brother." Xian Jizi's voice came from the instrument. "Junior sister Jade's son has already told me about what happened in Xuanzong. Xuanzong is the #1 sect of Taoism. Its strength is tyrannical." Li Mu asked, "Does senior brother want to persuade me to let the matter rest?" From the instrument, Xian Jizi's voice gradually became cold. "Xuanzong is the #1 sect of Taoism. Its strength is tyrannical. However, my Fulu school is not made of mud. Junior brother, please bear with it for half a day." Two martial uncles and junior sister are already on their way to Xuanzong. Chapter 537. Xuanzong on the Taoist Field. A Xuanzong Dongxian elder replaced Miao Yuanzi and preached to the tens of thousands of cultivators in the field. Most of what he talked about was the foundation of cultivation. At this moment, some people in the field were seriously comprehending, while others were still curious about the result of the incident just now. Although Xuanzong was powerful, Fulu school was also one of the 6 Taoist sections. They wondered if Xuanzong would disregard the brotherhood of the sect for an inner disciple. Soon, Qing Yunzi, Qing Songzi, Qing Xuanzi, and several other 4th-generation disciples returned to the field from the Taoist palace above. Then, a stream of light flashed and Miao Yuanzi floated in the air. He looked at the crowd and said lightly, "What happened just now was a misunderstanding. Now that it has been clarified, there is no need to think too much." Although Miao Yuanzi said so, there were more than 10,000 people in the field, and there was no lack of clever people. How could they not know the deeper meaning of his words? If it was really a misunderstanding, the senior from Fulu school would have appeared with him at this moment, but he was alone at this moment. It seemed that Xuanzong chose to protect the disciples of his sect for the sake of face, and did not care about the feelings of Fulu school at all. Even if they felt that this was not a good move, Xuanzong undoubtedly had the strength to do so. In the world of cultivation, strength was everything. Without strength, there was no right to reason. This was the sorrow of weak forces, but they did not expect that the powerful Fulu school would have such a day. As the #1 Taoist sect, Xuanzong had strength above all in the world of cultivation. Everything included the other 5 sections. In the field, no one blamed Xuanzong, and few people sympathized with Fulu school, because this was the rule of the world of cultivation. At this time, in the market, the cultivators who did not go to listen to the preaching were almost crazy. The Fulu Pavilion had just released the news that they would sell Fulu books below the heaven rank for free. They did not need spiritual jades, and as long as they provided materials for writing talismans, the Fulu Pavilion would write talismans for them for free. The yellow rank Fulu Pavilion provided 1 portion of talisman fluid, 2 portions of profound rank, and 4 portions of earth rank. The Fulu school would then write corresponding talismans for them. Everyone knew that the higher the level of the Fulu, the lower the success rate of forming a talisman. If one went to any sect or family that was good at Fulu and asked for an earth rank Fulu, which one of them would not ask for more than 10 portions of spiritual liquid and a large amount of spiritual jades? As long as they asked for 4 portions of spiritual liquid, they would be guaranteed an earth rank Fulu. What was the difference between this and giving them for free? No, this wasn't a free gift. This was simply Fulu school making a loss. The only troublesome thing was that they could only register now. The Fulu had to be collected in 3 months at the Fulu Pavilion in Jianghu, Great Zhou. No one suspected anything fishy, because the Fulu Pavilion did not want their talisman fluid or their spiritual jades. They only needed to register here, and then 3 months later, bring their talisman fluid or spiritual jades converted from talisman fluid to Jianghu, Great Zhou. The Fulu school would then fulfill its promise. As a great sect with 1,000 years of history, the Fulu school's reputation was not to be doubted. Although the process was a bit troublesome, the return was huge. For a time, there was a long line at the entrance of the Fulu Pavilion. In the market square, no matter if it was the shops on the street or the small stalls in the square, there was not a single customer. Many stall owners and shopkeepers had already packed up their stalls and shops and formed a long line at the entrance of the Fulu Pavilion. Inside the Fulu Pavilion, the disciples and the cultivators who had come at the last minute were furiously writing down the information of the people who had ordered the Fulu. Ma Feng maintained the discipline of the crowd. He gritted his teeth and said, "Damned Xuanzong, I'm not giving you a single piece of spiritual jade." The cultivators in the line outside all had Dharma sound transmission artifacts and were constantly communicating. "Second uncle, hurry up and close the shop. Come to the Fulu Pavilion. Father, hurry up and prepare some spiritual medicine and spiritual jades. We're going to Jianghu, Great Zhou right now. Old Ma, are you at the training hall? Don't listen. Why are you still listening to such useless things at a time like this? Hurry up and come to the Fulu Pavilion. There's a big bargain. Don't blame me for not reminding you if you're late." In the Xuanzong training hall, Miao Yuanzi was preaching. At some point in time, cultivators began to leave one after another. In the past, when he preached, this kind of situation would occur, but it was never on such a scale. Some of them left in a hurry after receiving the message from the Dharma sound transmission artifact. Some saw the people around them leave and also left after asking. When nearly 1,000 people left inexplicably, some Xuanzong disciples went to investigate and finally found the source of this matter. On the celestial mountain floating at the highest point of the sea, a Xuanzong elder said to Miao Yuanzi, "Sect master, the Fulu school's actions have broken the rules of the market. We can't allow them to continue like this." Miao Yuanzi felt guilty in his heart. When he heard this, he only waved his hand and said, "Let them be." The elder frowned slightly. "But sect master, this goes against the rules set by me, Xuanzong." Miao Yuanzi glanced at him and said, "I said, don't interfere in this matter." The elder looked up at him and slowly retreated. After leaving the Taoist palace, he flew to another mountain. In the Taoist palace, Taoist master Miao Dun looked at Miao Yuanzi and asked, "Senior brother, don't you think that Xuanzong has changed and is no longer the Xuanzong of the past?" Miao Yuanzi looked in the direction that the elder disappeared and sighed. In the end, he was indifferent and speechless. Not long after, accompanied by 2 elders, Taoist Cheng Zi flew out of the mountain and went straight to the market below. His face was gloomy and he said in a low voice, "It seems that the Fulu school really doesn't take Xuanzong seriously these years. Since that's the case, I'll teach this arrogant disciple a lesson on behalf of Fu Daozi." On the 3rd floor of the Fulu Pavilion, there was an hourglass on the table in front of Li Mu. It was the hourglass that he used to keep track of time when refining pills. At this moment, the sand in the hourglass was almost gone and there was only a small handful left. Before the sand was completely gone, a powerful aura suddenly came from the top of the Fulu Pavilion. It was the aura of Xuanzong's Grand Elder, Taoist Qingzi. Taoist Qingzi's figure flew from above and he said angrily, "Junior of the Fu Lu School, you've repeatedly challenged my, Xuanzong's, bottom line today. I'll teach you a lesson on behalf of Fu Daozi." The voice of Xuanzong's Grand Elder reverberated in the market and into the ears of countless cultivators. At this moment, everyone's impression of the Fu Lu School had improved greatly. Xuanzong's behavior just now was extremely immoral, and now it was even more outrageous. A Grand Elder of a sect with a cultivation of the 7th realm was bullying a 5th realm junior. How could such behavior be done by a fellow Taoist? Just as the surrounding cultivators began to sympathize with the young man from the Fu Lu School, on the 3rd floor of the Fu Lu Pavilion, Li Mu looked at the remaining sand in the hourglass and took a step forward. He was already outside the Fu Lu Pavilion. He looked directly at Taoist Qingzi and said coldly, "Xuanzong, you shameless old man. Do you think you're qualified to teach me a lesson on behalf of my master?" There was a long line of cultivators at the entrance of the Fu Lu Pavilion. When Li Mu's voice rang out, the noisy market instantly fell silent. If Xuanzong scolded their Grand Elder like this, the Fu Lu School would probably completely fall out with Xuanzong this time. Although this sentence pleased many cultivators, they also knew that this young man's fate would probably be very miserable. After all, there was an insurmountable gap between their cultivation levels. Taoist Qingzi also did not expect this young man to be so presumptuous. His face instantly darkened. In the void, an invisible hand grabbed at Li Mu. It was the same divine power that Miao Yuanzi had used, but its power was completely different. Li Mu felt that his body was trapped by the power of heaven and earth and could not move at all. Even the ordinary Dongxian could only watch as the giant hand grabbed at him, let alone the creation realm cultivators. This reminded Li Mu of the first time he met the Lord of Illusions. However, he was no longer the weak cultivator with divine power that he used to be. Li Mu used his mind to disperse the power of heaven and earth around him. The law bell flew out of his body and merged with Li Mu's body. At the same time, a Fu Lu talisman appeared in Li Mu's hand. He used his dermic powers to activate the talisman. The Fu Lu burned, and the shadow of a woman walked out of the Fu Lu. She exuded the aura of a 6th realm cultivator. Below, the crowd exclaimed in surprise. "He's actually planning to resist. This aura, is this a heaven-grade golden armor divine army talisman? It seems a little different. Even a heaven-grade divine army talisman is useless. A 6th realm cultivator is no threat to Elder Dao Qingzi." To everyone's surprise, the shadow of the woman who walked out of the Fu Lu didn't attack Dao Qingzi. Instead, she merged with the young man from the Fu Lu School, causing his aura to rise to the 6th realm in an instant. The invisible giant hand was already reaching for him. Li Mu didn't dodge. The bell shadow on his body flashed, and the giant hand collapsed. The bell shadow also collapsed and dissipated. He knew very well that the Empress Divine Avatar wouldn't exist in his body for long. Before Dao Qingzi could do anything else, he had already launched an attack. He used his mind to control the power of heaven and earth. Wind and thunder intertwined around Dao Qingzi. The 6th realm elders of the Black Sect who had rushed over after hearing the commotion felt a chill in their hearts when they saw the wind and thunder. This was definitely a supernatural power that only a 6th realm cultivator could use. Dao Qingzi stood where he was and looked at Li Mu indifferently. A protective shield appeared around his body, blocking the astral wind and lightning outside his body. The next moment, dark clouds suddenly gathered above his head. Wind mixed with black raindrops fell, and the shield around Dao Qingzi's body started to thin rapidly. The dragon clans called the wind and summoned the rain. A hint of shock flashed across his eyes. Outsiders might not know, but he knew better than anyone else that the power of these spells was comparable to that of the most powerful cultivators in Dongxian. Of course, this was far from enough for him. He floated in the air and only maintained the shield. He didn't do anything else. Even with his status and position, he had failed to capture a 5th-level junior personally. If he were to make a move again, even he would lose face. When he used all his trump cards and completely understood that the gap between the two realms couldn't be closed no matter what he did, he would realize how laughable he was. He would become a joke who overestimated himself and was like an ant trying to shake a tree. Countless elders from Xuanzong had already flown out. They floated quietly outside, and no one intervened. If they had to intervene in the battle between the Grand Elder and the junior from Fulu School, after this exchange, Xuanzong would also become the biggest joke in Zhuzhou. However, they looked at Li Mu with fear that shouldn't exist. The disciples of the Qing generation looked at the battle in the sky. Instead of fear, they were shocked and terrified. This person was only the same age as them, but he could already fight the Grand Elder. Even if he lost in the end, no one had the right to laugh at him. In the sky, Li Mu didn't have time to pay attention to the discussions below. Without a doubt, without relying on the Empress or the demonic corpse, Dao Chengzi was the most powerful enemy he had ever encountered. His most powerful attack couldn't even break through the defense set up by Dao Chengzi. There seemed to be a natural barrier between the two of them. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't cross it. If he couldn't fight head-on, he could only use his wits. Li Mu took a deep breath. His Qingxian sword flew out instantly, turning into sword shadows that filled the sky, and attacked Dao Chengzi. Tens of thousands of swords flew out. A sixth realm elder from Xuanzong narrowed his eyes. He took a deep breath and said in a low voice, "What a powerful Taoist technique. With this technique, he can probably fight Dongxian as a creation and transcend as a Dongxian. With his current cultivation level, not many people in Xuanzong can take this technique head-on." Jade Sun floated in the distance and murmured, "This Taoist technique has probably touched the edge of the seventh realm. In other words, if we really fight, we won't be his match at all." Dao Chengzi's expression was still calm as he looked at the sword shadows that filled the sky. However, a hint of seriousness appeared in his eyes. He strengthened the shield outside his body. The sword shadows crashed into the shield and collapsed one after another. However, the dermic power shield also thinned at a speed visible to the naked eye before finally dissipating. However, there were only a few sword shadows left. Dao Chengzi's dermic power swept out. He stared at Li Mu indifferently and said, "Junior, what other skills do you have? Show them all." Before he finished speaking, his eyes narrowed. The last few sword shadows collapsed under the sweep of his dermic power. However, there was still an illusory sword that didn't slow down. It pierced through his forehead at a speed that couldn't be dodged. The small sword pierced through his forehead. Dao Chengzi's body wasn't injured at all, but his primordial spirit was instantly injured. Under the gaze of countless ancestral state cultivators, Xuanzong disciples, and elders, their Grand Supreme Elder spat out a mouthful of blood. His aura instantly weakened by half. He was injured. He was injured at the hands of a seventh realm junior. Countless people were shocked. Their faces were filled with disbelief. A seventh realm transcendent expert was injured by a fifth realm cultivator? Outside the Fulu pavilion, the Fulu school disciples' breathing quickened. Their bodies trembled as they stared at the figure floating in the air. This was their martial uncle and martial granduncle. This was the integrity of the Fulu school. Two streams of tears slowly fell from Xiaobai's limpid eyes. Unlike the Fulu school disciples, her eyes were filled with affection as she looked at the figure. In the air, Li Mu's face was pale. He imitated Dao Chengzi's tone and said indifferently, "Old thing, you're still pretending?" Chapter 5:38. The market, the training ground, and the countless figures floating in the air were all silent. Only Li Mu's voice echoed on the sea. Just now, everyone had witnessed a miracle. A cultivator in the creation realm had actually injured a transcendent realm cultivator in a head-on battle, but he himself was unharmed. This battle was enough to be recorded in the history of the cultivation world. When future generations mentioned the Fulu school and Xuanzong at the same time, they couldn't ignore this battle that spanned two major realms. The elders of Xuanzong floated in the air, still motionless. It wasn't that they didn't want to move, but that they couldn't. The Grand Elder was in the seventh realm, fighting against a fifth realm junior. Did he need their help? Now that things had developed to this point, it was completely out of Xuanzong's control. It was the opposite of their original goal. Xuanzong had protected Qing Chengzi because he didn't want the school to be disgraced. Now, all the cultivators on the Zhu continent knew that Xuanzong had protected his disciple and bullied the weak. The Grand Elder's face had been beaten to the ground, and Xuanzong's face had been completely destroyed. If they had known that things would come to this, they would have punished Qing Qingzi severely. But now, this had nothing to do with Qing Qingzi. Xuanzong needed to establish his authority and regain his lost face. In the air, Dao Qingzi's vital spirit was injured, and his aura was weakened. His face was extremely pale, but not because of his injury, but because of the humiliation. He had been humiliated by a junior in front of all the disciples of Xuanzong, and in front of more than 10,000 cultivators. At this moment, he wanted to kill that person for the first time. His voice was cold as he said word by word, "Junior, you disrespected your elders and deceived your master. Today, I will punish you on behalf of Fulu School." After all, Dao Chengzi was a super expert who had reached the 7th level many years ago. If Li Mu hadn't caught him off guard and mixed the intellectual sword into the 10,000 sword shadows, he wouldn't have been able to injure Dao Chengzi at all. When he was in the 5th realm, his wisdom sword could slash Dongxuan's primordial spirit. Now that his cultivation had temporarily increased to the 6th realm, he could only slightly injure Dao Chengzi. However, he wasn't afraid of Dao Chengzi. In the face of Dao Chengzi's threat, Li Mu ignored it. He turned around and flew toward the Fulu Pavilion. At the same time, on the 3rd floor of Fulu Pavilion, the last strand of sand fell from the hourglass. Dao Chengzi's killing intent surged as he raised a hand at Li Mu's back. But at this moment, 3 streams of light suddenly appeared on the western horizon and sped over. A loud voice exploded in the sky. "Dao Chengzi, do you think everyone in Fulu School is dead?" A huge black sword came from afar and pointed directly at Dao Chengzi. Dao Chengzi hurriedly took out a square shield. The huge sword collided with the square shield and sent Dao Chengzi flying for thousands of feet. The 2 Xuanzong Grand Supreme Elders who had just arrived didn't intend to let him go and chased after him. A Xuanzong Grand Supreme Elder said in shock, "It's Martial Uncle Tian Yangzi and Martial Uncle Tian Qingzi. They actually came in person." Tian Yangzi and Tian Qingzi were famous Taoist experts. The 2 7th Realm Grand Supreme Elders of Fulu School appeared here at this moment. It meant that ever since that incident, Fulu School didn't plan to be friendly with Xuanzong. On the ground, countless ancestral state cultivators were dumbfounded. Today was really an eye-opener for them. Not only did they see Dongxian Transcendence experts injured, but they also saw a battle between Transcendence experts. This trip to Xuanzong was really worth it. Li Mu landed on the ground and walked all the way to Fulu Pavilion. Everywhere he went, the bustling crowd automatically made way for him. Yu Zhenzi didn't participate in the battle. Instead, he immediately flew to Li Mu's side and asked with concern, "Are you okay?" Li Mu smiled and said, "I'm fine. Senior sister, I've made you worry." The spiritual snail in the storage space had been vibrating for a while. Li Mu took out the spiritual snail and injected magic power. The Empress's voice immediately sounded, "What happened on your side?" "I felt that you used that avatar," Li Mu said. "It's already taken care of. It's not convenient to talk about it now. I'll explain it to your majesty when we return to the divine capital." Zhou Yi asked again, "Are you okay?" Li Mu said, "I'm fine. Your majesty, don't worry." In the Chang'e Palace, Zhou Yi didn't ask any more questions. He took the initiative to put away the spiritual snail and then said to Mr. Mei, "He should be in Xuanzong now. Order the officials of the East County to investigate what happened in Xuanzong." At the entrance of Fulu Pavilion, Li Mu said to Qing Jingzi, "Pack up and prepare to return to the divine capital." Qing Jingzi led the disciples back to the pavilion to pack up. At this time, a female cultivator walked to Li Mu and asked nervously, "Senior, can we stay in Fulu Pavilion?" Behind her, there were more than 10 pretty female cultivators. They looked at Li Mu nervously. These female cultivators were the shop assistants that Ma Feng recruited. Li Mu said to them, "There won't be Fulu Pavilion in Xuanzong anymore. If you're willing, there's still a place for you in the new Fulu Pavilion in the divine capital of Great Zhou." The girls said in unison, "We're willing." The female cultivators happily went to Fulu School to help pack up. Li Mu looked up at the sky. Dao Chengzi was already slightly injured. Under the siege of 2 Grand Supreme Elders, he was in a sorry state. The other 2 level 7 cultivators in Xuanzong couldn't sit still anymore. They flew up to stop them. Uncle Masters, let's talk. Let's sit down and talk. Don't hurt our friendship. Tian Yangzi attacked with all his strength. He said coldly, friendship? Yes. Dao Chengzi is going to clean up our Fulu school. What's there to talk about? I don't have much time left, but my Fulu school isn't a place that anyone can mess with. If you want to humiliate my Fulu school, wait until I'm dead. The Xuanzong Taoist priest said, Fulu school and Xuanzong are brothers. Uncle Masters, please stop. Don't hurt our friendship. Tian Chengzi trapped the 2 Xuanzong Grand Supreme Elders with his Fulu. His voice was equally cold. When you, Xuanzong, covered up your disciples and humiliated my Fulu school, why didn't you think of your brothers? The injured Dao Chengzi was forced to retreat in defeat by Tian Yangzi. The other 2 Grand Supreme Elders were also trapped. Xuanzong had 5 7th Realm cultivators. Only Miao Yunzi and another Grand Supreme Elder were left. At a certain moment, an angry roar came from an upside-down mountain. An old man flew out and said angrily, Tian Yangzi, Tan Chengzi, don't go too far. He wanted to help Dao Chengzi but was stopped by Yuzhen. The old man looked at Yuzhen and said gloomily, Nephew Yuzhen, you want to stop me? Yuzhen looked at him indifferently and said coldly, when Dao Chengzi bullied my junior brother, did you ever think that he was your nephew? The cultivators below looked up at the sky in silence. 7th Realm cultivators were always elusive. Ordinary people rarely saw them. Today, they saw 7 of them at the same time. 7 transcending state cultivators were fighting in a chaotic battle. High up in the sky, the light of spells was unceasing. If their battle was on the ground, the whole of Xuanzong would probably be destroyed. Even from so far away, everyone could feel the waves of pressure. No matter what the result was, Xuanzong's reputation was completely destroyed this time. In the Taoist palace on the highest mountain, the bright light of spells shone into the palace. Miao Dun looked at Miao Yunzi and asked, You're not going to help? Miao Yunzi shook his head. No. Miao Dun said, If you don't help, Uncle Master will have an excuse later. Miao Yunzi breathed a sigh of relief and said, I've been in the sect for too long. I'm bored. I'm just thinking of going out for a walk. Miao Dun was silent for a moment and said, I also want to go out for a walk and find an opportunity to break through. In the market and on the training grounds, the cultivators of the Zhu continent had been looking up for a long time. The battle in the sky didn't have a result. Obviously, the Fulu school and Xuanzong had a big conflict. The 3 elders of the Fulu school came from afar, but the cultivators of the 2 sects couldn't really fight to the death. Up in the sky, the battle was still going on. However, at a certain moment, everyone suddenly disappeared. After a moment of shock, everyone was in an uproar. Where are they? Why did they all disappear? Strange. Why can't I see anyone? In an instant, the elders of the 2 sects disappeared. At the entrance of the Fulu pavilion, Li Mu's vision blurred. When he reappeared, he was in another space. This space was very big, much bigger than the Emperor's secret garden, but not as big as Li Mu's Demon Emperor space. Other than the size, there was a big difference between this space and Li Mu's Demon Emperor space. After the Demon Emperor's space had a new master, it went from being dead silent to full of vitality. There were mountains, rivers, lakes, grass, trees, fish, and insects. It was like a small world. Although there were mountains, rivers, trees, and grass in this space, there was no life. The mountains were gray. The trees on the mountains were withered. There wasn't a trace of green. The water was black. There wasn't a single fish swimming in the water. The grass under Li Mu's feet was yellow. The entire space was dead silent. The 2 Taishang elders and Yuzenzi were beside Li Mu. In front of them were the 4 elders of Xuanzong. In the middle of the withered grass, an old man sat cross-legged. The old man had no eyebrows or beard. There were only a few strands of messy hair on his bald head. Wrinkles crisscrossed his face, mixed with brown patches. He sat there with his eyes closed and his head bowed. There was no breath coming from him. He was like a dead man. But in Li Mu's eyes, what sat there was not a person, but a mountain. This mountain stood tall and lofty, unreachable. Chapter 539. The elders of the Fulu school and Xuanzong were originally at daggers drawn, but the moment they saw this old man, they restrained their fighting spirit and became respectful. "Greetings, martial uncle." Everyone bowed respectfully, and even the two grand elders of the talisman puppet sect were no exception. The old man opened his eyes. Li Mu discovered that his eyes were turbid and lifeless, his pupils unfocused and unfocused. He seemed to be blind. He faced Li Mu's group of four and said in a low voice, "Have you caused enough trouble? If you've caused enough trouble, then go back." Although the old man was blind, when he faced Li Mu still felt as if a pair of eyes were piercing through his body. When facing Dao Qingzi, he still had the will to fight, but in front of this old man, he simply could not summon any fighting spirit. Yuzhen's lips moved as if he wanted to say something, but a grand elder stopped him and bowed. "Sorry to disturb you, martial uncle." He waved his sleeves, swept up Li Mu and Yuzhen's grand elder, and flew upwards. After flying past a certain height, Li Mu's surroundings changed, and he once again returned to the sky above Xuanzong. From beginning to end, the old man had only said one sentence, and it was enough to extinguish the anger of the two grand elders and make them take the initiative to retreat. The old man's identity was already on the verge of being revealed. It was rumored that Xuanzong, as the #1 sect of the Taoism, had a deep foundation, and even had an 8th realm expert within the sect. Today, Li Mu knew that this was not a legend. The 7th realm expert gave Li Mu the feeling of a tall mountain, but it was not unreachable. He could always see the summit, but in this tall mountain, Li Mu could see the clouds halfway up the mountain. As for how high it was beyond the clouds, he could not even imagine it. Yuzhen's grand elder frowned. "Martial uncle, the disciple that Xuanzong is protecting." Tian Yangzi shook his head and looked at Li Mu. "Child, it's because the sect isn't strong enough that you have to suffer." The Taishang elder didn't say it explicitly, but Li Mu understood what he meant. Xuanzong's 8th level cultivator had made his stance clear. It was impossible to take Qingzi away from Xuanzong. Above transcendence was unification of the way. In the entire ancestral state, among the 6 Taoist sects and the Great Zhou court, only Xuanzong had such a powerhouse. No one could defy his will. Li Mu bowed to the three and said, "Many thanks, martial uncles and senior sister Yuzhen." The two elders smiled and said, "Before we two old men die, no one can bully you for no reason." At the entrance of Fulu Pavilion, Qing Jingzi had already gathered all the disciples of Fulu school, including the dozen or so female cultivators. The Taishang elder released a giant boat and everyone flew onto it. Li Mu stood at the bow of the boat, raised his hand and gently pressed down. An enormous handprint appeared in the sky above the talisman pavilion. Boom! There was a loud noise and dust. From then on, there was no more Fulu Pavilion in Xuanzong. Li Mu looked around and imprinted everything here in his mind. One day he would return to this place. Soon, the flying boat turned into a stream of light and flew into the sky, disappearing into the horizon. Countless cultivators looked into the distance. They would never forget their experience in Xuanzong, nor would they forget the immortal legend who dared to fight a transcendence cultivator with a creation realm cultivation. The name of Fulu School's Li Mu would soon be known by everyone in the cultivation world of ancestral state. Xuanzong. On the highest floor of the Taoist palace, cultivators above the 6th level of Xuanzong were gathered. Dao Qingzi looked coldly at Miao Yunzi and asked in a deep voice, "As the headmaster of Xuanzong, when the people of Fulu School attacked the mountain gate, you just stood by and watched. What right do you have to be the headmaster?" Faced with his rebuke, Miao Yunzi took off the Taoist crown on his head and said, "You're right, Uncle Master. From today onwards, I will resign as the headmaster and go out to wander the world to seek the way. The headmaster position will be temporarily taken by other brothers." Senior brother, please reconsider." Several people in the Taoist palace changed their expressions and tried to persuade him. Miao Yunzi just waved his hand and said, "I've made up my mind. There's no need to say more." Dao Chengzi picked up the Taoist crown that symbolized the position of the headmaster of Xuanzong and said lightly, "You are a sinner of Xuanzong. You are indeed unfit to be the headmaster. Miao Xuanzi, you will temporarily take the headmaster position." A figure stood out and took the Taoist crown. He said respectfully, "Yes, master." The Grand Elder acted arbitrarily and forced the headmaster to abdicate and let his disciple take over. This caused many elders to be dissatisfied. How can the headmaster position be decided by the Grand Elder alone? Grand Elder, you're overstepping your bounds. Even if someone takes over the headmaster position temporarily, he has to ask Elder Tianjizi before making a decision. Faced with the overbearing Grand Elder, everyone spoke up until a figure slowly walked into the Taoist palace from outside. The old man had his hands behind his back and his body was hunched. He limped as if he could fall down at any time. It was such an old man that made all the powerhouses in the Taoist palace bow and greet him respectfully. "Greetings, Uncle Master." "Greetings, Uncle Master." As the only 8th-level powerhouse in the sect, the old man had dedicated his life to Xuanzong. He used divination to reach the Dao integration stage and divined all the heavenly secrets for the sect. Xuanzong's strength was inseparable from the old man's guidance. The heavenly secrets were hard to predict to begin with. Divining people was already extremely difficult, let alone divining the fate of the number 1 sect of the Taoist sect. For more than 100 years, Elder Tianjizi had made great contributions to the sect with his unpredictable divination skills. However, he had also suffered a backlash from the heavenly Dao. He had lost his sight and suffered injuries that were difficult to recover from. He was Xuanzong's disciple, including the 7th-level elders, and was the most respected existence in their hearts. The old man walked in front of everyone and said slowly, "While Miao Yunzi is traveling, Dao Qingzi will temporarily be in charge of the sect's affairs." Since Uncle Master Tianjizi had spoken, no one in the sect would object. Dao Qingzi was delighted and immediately cupped his hands. "Yes, Uncle Master." As expected, after the old man spoke, no one objected. They all bowed and said, "Yes, Uncle Master." No one in Xuanzong doubted Uncle Master Tianjizi's words. His divination skills were unparalleled in the world. He didn't even need to explain his orders because he could see the future that no one else could. The old man looked at Dao Qingzi and said, "Xuanzong's future is in your hands." Dao Qingzi's expression was solemn. He said, "I will definitely manage the sect well and not disappoint Uncle Master." Not long after, in the sky above the Eastern Sea, Miao Dun looked at Miao Yunzi and asked, "You're leaving just like that?" Grandmaster didn't pass the position to Uncle Master Dao Qingzi because his temperament wasn't suitable to be the sect leader. He was worried that he would completely destroy Xuanzong. "Once you leave, Xuanzong will be able to do whatever he wants." Miao Yunzi said, "This is Uncle Master's intention. Don't you trust him?" Miao Dun was silent for a long time before he said, "I agree with Uncle Master's every decision. Only this time, but he can see much further than us. Is Uncle Master Dao Qingzi really Xuanzong's future?" In a dead silent space, Tianjizi sat cross-legged on the withered grass. He closed his eyes and made a gesture of pinching his fingers. Soon, a trace of blood flowed out from his mouth. In this space, the grass and trees became even more withered and yellow. Tianjizi slowly opened his eyes and murmured, "There can be no construction without destruction. Only by seeking life in death can there be a sliver of fate." In the sky above the Eastern Sea, on the huge spirit boat, Li Mu had already learned the identity of the old man in Xuanzong. Tianjizi was the only elder of the Tian generation in Xuanzong. He was also the elder with the highest seniority in Taoism. With his unfathomable divination skills, he had helped Taoism avoid several catastrophes in his life. One of the important reasons why diabolism did not dare to invade on a large scale was that Tianjizi had not yet fallen. But this was not a reason for Xuanzong to bully others. Li Mu had promised Xiao Bai that he would let her personally avenge the death of her clan members. He had left Xuanzong today, but the matter between him and Xuanzong had only just begun. Li Mu contacted Xianjizi with a communication talisman and told him that he was going to rebuild the Fulu Pavilion in Shendu. Li Mu did not intend to be so ruthless, But now that things had come to this, he no longer needed to give Xuanzong any face. At this moment, a large portion of the Zhu province cultivators in Xuanzong had reserved the Fulu Pavilion. They would come to Great Zhou's Shen, due to collect talismans within 3 months. The price was so low that it defied common sense. If others were to write talismans, they would naturally lose out. But if Li Mu did it himself, he would make a great profit. He wanted to build a cultivation market square in Shendu that was even larger than Xuanzong. The imperial court would only take a maximum of 10% of the profits from the peddlers in the market square. He would also build a Dao field next to the market square and invite experts from the Department of Worship to preach the Dao every few days. The market square and Dao field would be open all year round. With the imperial court's influence and Shendu's excellent location at the center of the Zhu continent, this Daoist exchange meeting in Xuanzong would be the last. When they passed by Shendu, Li Mu and Xiao Bai got off the flying boat first. The 2 Taishang elders and Yuzenzi continued north to return to the ancestral court. As soon as Li Mu stepped into the house, the space in the courtyard fluctuated. The empress walked out with Mr. Mei and Shangguan Li. Li Mu walked forward and said, "Your Majesty," Zhou Yi said with a sullen face, "I know." She walked to Xiao Bai and hugged her gently, saying, "Sister will avenge you." Xuanzong didn't even give face to the Fulu school, let alone the great Zhou court. Li Mu walked forward and said, "Your Majesty, please calm down. Xuanzong is powerful. This matter needs to be discussed at length." Zhou Yi said indifferently, "I won't be so impulsive." She looked at Mr. Mei and asked, "Have you found out?" Mr. Mei nodded and said, "Yes, Xuanzong has a total of 23 orthodoxies in the Great Zhou. They are scattered in the 5 counties in the east. Like the 6 sects of Dao, there was not only one orthodoxy. In addition to the ancestral court, there were also many subsects in charge of providing fresh blood to the ancestral court. Many disciples of the ancestral court were promoted from these subsects. Generally speaking, the Great Zhou court would provide convenience for these subsects. For example, they would be given some blessed land with abundant spiritual energy as a mountain gate for them to use for free. Zhou Yi said coldly, "Order the 5 counties to take back the land the court gave them. Tell them to get lost. From now on, there is no Xuanzong Taoist field in the Great Zhou." Chapter 540. Yantai County, Mount Qingshu. In the current cultivation world, Taoism is the most powerful school. There are 6 schools and countless schools. Most of these schools can be regarded as branches of the 6 schools and have the same Taoist tradition as one of the 6 schools. Among them, Mount Qingshu in Yantai County is an important Xuanzong Taoist school. The Xuanzong Ancestral Court is located outside the East Sea and is isolated from the mainland. It is very inconvenient for it to do things, such as recruiting disciples and transmitting messages, which are all done by external Taoist schools. As the Taoist school of Xuanzong, the number 1 school of Taoism, the Qingshu school has an extremely high status in Yantai County. It has about 100 disciples. Its headmaster is a peak creation stage expert and is an elder of the Hua generation in Xuanzong. Xuanzong has a revered status in the cultivation world. The Great Zhou Court also opens the doors to them to set up Taoist schools in various counties and gives them extremely preferential treatment in several eastern counties. Not only does it give them famous mountains and caves to use as gates, it also uses the court's resources to build Taoist temples for them and recommend extremely talented disciples for them, etc. Today, a flying boat suddenly flies towards Mount Qingshu. On the flying boat are several cultivators with high levels of power. They fly to the sky above Mount Qingshu, then put away the flying boat and land. The Qingshu temple's guarding disciples recognize that the newcomer is the Yantai County governor. They step forward and say, "Sir, please wait here for a moment. I'll go to the temple to report to the abbot." The Qingshu temple is backed by Xuanzong, so it does not care about ordinary people. Even if it is an official of Yantai County or a cultivator below the 6th level who comes to visit, they must wait outside the gate. But this time, the Yantai County governor does not wait here. He just waves his hand indifferently and says, "No need." His face darkens. He says, "Do it." Boom. A Yantai County governor picks up a huge hammer, flies up and smashes it fiercely on the Qingshu School's gate. Under this blow, the Qingshu School's lofty gate, together with the huge plaque with the 3 words Qingshu School written on it, shatters and collapses with a loud rumble. The 2 guarding disciples are already dumbfounded. Looking at the collapsed gate, their lips trembling, they cannot even say a word. Several silhouettes fly out from inside the Taoist temple. A furious voice says, "How dare you? Which thug dares to break into my Qingshu mountain school?" A man in a Taoist robe flew out of the temple. When he saw who it was, his expression changed and he asked in shock, "County Governor Qin, are you crazy?" The Yantai County Governor stood in the air and said faintly, "His Majesty has decreed that from today onwards, Xuanzong Taoist temples are prohibited within the Great Zhou." "Then where do you want us to go?" the man asked furiously. The Yantai County chief says expressionlessly, "This is your own business. I'll give you a day's time to quickly move out of Mount Qingshu. Otherwise, the county office will take coercive measures. At that time, anyone who dares to obstruct the court's official business will be killed without mercy." The man in the Taoist robe had a gloomy expression. The Yantai County chief did not seem to be joking, and it was impossible for him to make such a joke. This time, the Great Zhou court is serious. This is a big matter for both the Qingshu school and Xuanzong. He immediately flew back to the Qingshu mountain school, took out his communication magic tool, and contacted the ancestral court. At the same time, the great meeting hall of the Xuanzong ancestral court has already become a pot of porridge. The Qingshu school sent a message. The Great Zhou court gave them a day's time to move out. This is too much. The Tianxin school just sent people. They said their mountain gate was smashed by the Nanyang County Governor and the Great Zhou court wants to occupy their Taoist temple to raise chickens and ducks. The Cave Abyss school was also asked to move out. Why did the Great Zhou court suddenly attack my Xuanzong? Today, all of Xuanzong's Taoist temples in Great Zhou were given an ultimatum by the Great Zhou court. They were ordered to move out within a day. It seemed that the Great Zhou court wanted to expel Xuanzong's Taoist temples and drive them overseas. Dao Chengzi had only been in charge of Xuanzong for 2 days, and this happened. This made his expression extremely ugly. He said coldly, "What is the Great Zhou court trying to do?" At this time, a Xuanzong elder stepped forward and said, "Martial Granduncle, this must have something to do with Ling Jizi of the Fulu school." Dao Chengzi felt a headache when he heard this name. His reputation was completely ruined by this person. This person made him lose face in front of all the cultivators in the world. Dao Chengzi wanted nothing more than to cut him into pieces. He asked in a low voice, "What does this have to do with him?" The Xuanzong elder Taoist priest said, "Martial Granduncle, you may not know this, but Ling Jizi is not only a second-generation disciple of the Fulu school, but he is also an important official of the Great Zhou. He has authority in his hands. There are even rumors that he is the exclusive property of the Great Zhou Empress. Perhaps because he suffered a loss in Xuanzong, the Great Zhou Empress became angry and took revenge on Xuanzong for her lover. Regardless of the reason, the Great Zhou court's actions did not sit well with Xuanzong. These dozens of Taoist temples were very important to Xuanzong. They were responsible for providing the sect with new blood. The Great Zhou court's expulsion of these Taoist temples from the country would not affect Xuanzong too much in the short term. However, in the long term, it was a plan to remove the firewood from under the cauldron. As long as Xuanzong opened his mouth, countless people in the cultivation world would join him. However, geniuses needed to be nurtured from a young age. If they missed the opportunity, it would be very difficult for them to become a top expert in the future. In the face of the Great Zhou court's coercion, Dao Chengzi was silent for a moment. Then he said, "Move a few more islands and temporarily settle them here. Xuanzong has been passed down for thousands of years and has seen many dynasties change. If the Zhou dynasty thinks that they can challenge Xuanzong, I don't mind supporting a new ruler of Zhu province." No one expected Ling Jizi's revenge to come so quickly. All of Xuanzong's Taoist temples were expelled from the country, and a good exchange meeting was ruined. In just a few days, 30% of the cultivators left for Shindu of the Great Zhou. It would not be long before what happened in Xuanzong in the past 2 days spread throughout the cultivation world of Zhu province. As the #1 sect of Taoism, they had lost all face. Xuanzong no longer had a foothold in Great Zhou. At this time, a group of cultivators came from the Thousand Fox Nation in the distant Life Province. Ever since the Thousand Fox Country and the Great Zhou dynasty had formed an alliance, they had opened up a trade route to each other. Jianghu County and the Thousand Fox Country had even opened up a trade route. Various large sects and families had gradually begun to do business with the Demon Country. They used spiritual jades, magic treasures, pills, and other items to trade for the Yao nation's abundant spiritual medicines and profited a lot. In the imperial palace, Illusion Princess paced around in her chambers and muttered to herself, It's been so long, and he still hasn't come to see me. He doesn't recognize me after he's done with me. Bastard." At this time, Fox 6 suddenly rushed in and said, "Your Majesty, I just heard something from those human cultivators." Illusion Princess said angrily, "I don't want to hear it now." Fox 6 said, "It's about Li Mu." Illusion Princess immediately looked up. "Speak." Fox 6 said slowly, "I heard a few human cultivators discussing something. They said that a few days ago, Li Mu and Xuanzong had a conflict. Even the seventh realm elders of the two sects were alerted." Fox 6 described Xuanzong's matter in detail. After hearing this, Illusion Princess was furious. She gritted her teeth and said, "Damn it, how dare they bully my man? I'll bring people to flatten their sect." Fox 6 hurriedly advised, "Your Majesty, don't be rash. Xuanzong is the most powerful sect in Zhu province. They have 5 seventh realm cultivators, and rumor has it that they even have 8th realm cultivators in their sect. Let alone us, even the Empress of Great Zhou can't touch Xuanzong. Oh, right, there's someone who wants to trade spiritual medicines with us. It's Xuanzong's disciple." At the entrance of the palace, more than 10 human cultivators were waiting. Although Zhu province was vast and had abundant resources, there were also many people. The spiritual medicines sold everywhere were often expensive and priceless. However, the Yao nation was different. This place was rich in spiritual medicines, and the demons didn't know how to refine pills or write talismans. They could buy or trade spiritual medicines they needed at a very low price. Standing at the front of the crowd was a man in a Taoist robe. The cultivators tacitly kept their distance from him. Xuanzong's disciples were high and mighty. They didn't want to get close to them even if they didn't look at them. Not long after, a beautiful demoness walked in from inside. She glanced at the crowd and asked, "Who's Xuanzong's disciple?" The cultivators sighed in their hearts. Xuanzong was indeed Xuanzong. Even in the desolate Yao nation, Xuanzong's disciples had the privilege of being received first. The man in the Taoist robe stood out. He raised his head and said arrogantly, "I am." The beautiful female demon looked at him and confirmed, "You're Xuanzong's disciple?" The man puffed out his chest and said, "Xuanzong Hua Xuanzi." Fox 6's gaze turned cold. She said indifferently, "Except for this Hua something from Xuanzong, everyone can go in." Hua Xuanzi was stunned. He asked, "What about me?" Fox 6 looked at him and said coldly, "I'll give you 3 breaths. Get out of here and tell your sect that Xuanzong's disciples are not welcome in Jianghu Nation. The next time you dare to step in here, I'll break your legs. Get out." Chapter 541. The cultivators in front of the palace of Thousand Fox were stunned. They did not know what was going on. Xuanzong's disciples were respected wherever they went, but they were being targeted in the Yao nation. While Hua Xuanzi was still stunned, Hu Lu had already started counting down. 1, 2, 3. As soon as she finished her last word, several palace guards flew out. Several beams of Dharma spells engulfed Hua Xuanzi. Hua Xuanzi was Xuanzong's disciple after all. He instantly retreated. He floated in the air and said with a gloomy face, "Do you know what you're doing? How dare you treat Xuanzong like this? Have you foreseen the consequences?" A level 6 demonic corpse flew out of the palace. Hua Xuanzi shut his mouth completely when he sensed the powerful aura. He turned around and ran. He had no choice but to lower his head when he was under someone else's roof. He had to hurry back to the sect and tell the elders what had happened here. The other 10 or so cultivators slowly walked into the palace. The The first thing they saw was a human statue. There was also a similar statue at the city gate of Thousand Fox Nation. The appearance of two human statues in the Yao Nation reminded them of a rumor. It was said that the current queen of Thousand Fox Nation, the ruler of half of the Yao Nation, had an extraordinary relationship with an important minister in the Great Zhou. When they saw the two statues, they connected it to the conflict between Li Mu and Xuanzong. Then, they connected it to Thousand Fox Nation's rejection of Xuanzong. They knew that the rumor was not just a rumor. In the bedroom, Phantom Princess said to the voice transmission instrument unhappily, "You didn't even tell me about such a big thing. Who do you think I am?" Divine Capital, Li Mansion. Li Mu glanced at Lu Hanyan, who had just returned to Divine Capital. She was talking to Wan Wan and Xiao Bai. He said, "It's not a big deal, so I didn't want to tell you." Phantom Princess did not dwell on the matter. She asked, "When will you come to see me?" Li Mu whispered, "I have a lot of things to do in the next few months. When I'm done, I'll go see you." Illusion Princess rolled around on the bed and asked with a red face, "I missed you. Did you miss me?" Lu Hanyan had already noticed this. If he dared to flirt with her here, he would die here today. Li Mu whispered, "It's not convenient now. I'll contact you later." By the time he put away the sound-transmitting Dharma artifact, Lu Hanyan had already walked over. She looked at Li Mu and said indifferently, "Come with me." Li Mu followed her into the room and said, "I bought some clothes for you. See if there's anything you like." Lu Hanyan sat on the chair and said, "Don't worry." Li Mu continued, "A few days ago, we saw Wan Wan and her parents and family members in the Immortal's capital. They were the same as before. In order to prevent Wan Wan from seeing them sad, I sent people to chase them away." Lu Hanyan nodded and said, "Well done." Then she looked at Li Mu and asked, "Who will you contact later?" Although Li Mu had been hiding it from the Empress, he did not plan to hide it from Lu Hanyan. He looked up at her and said, "There's something I need to confess to you." The accident in Thousand Fox Nation had always been something that Li Mu was too ashamed to talk about. As an indomitable man, he withstood countless temptations, but in the end he was defeated by a fox. Lu Hanyan's face darkened and asked, "Does Xiao Bai know?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "I haven't told her yet. Listen to me. That was really an accident. I didn't expect." Lu Hanyan stood up and snorted coldly. She said, "It's useless to explain to me. You'd better explain to Xiao Bai." She walked out of the room and left Li Mu alone. Li Mu decided not to tell Xiao Bai that he already had another fox by his side. The most important thing now was to let her take revenge for the murder of her clan and her grandmother. This had become an obsession in her heart. The Heavenly Fox clan's obsession with revenge was so deep that her cultivation had been stagnant for a long time. Li Mu walked to the yard and asked them to choose a few sets of clothes. Then he went to Jianghu Palace. As soon as he took out the clothes, Zhou Yi glanced at him and said, "They chose these, didn't they?" She got an affirmative answer from Li Mu's expression. She snorted softly and said, "I knew it. If they didn't choose the leftovers, you wouldn't give them to me." Li Mu said helplessly, "Your Majesty, you misunderstood me. I have already chosen a few sets for you. I just wanted to let Your Majesty see if there are any that you like." He took out a few other sets of clothes and said, "I have already chosen these for Your Majesty." Zhou Yi soon forgave Li Mu and went to the inner hall to try on the clothes. Li Mu looked at Mr. Mei and Shangguan Li and said, "You can also choose a few sets. Although they are not treasures, they look good on you." Mr. Mei glanced at him indifferently and said, "They only gave us the leftovers after others chose." Li Mu waved his hand and put away all the clothes. He said indifferently, "Take it or leave it." Mr. Mei said angrily, "You heartless man. I even asked Zhu Wei to help you get information. How can you treat me like this?" Li Mu was a little slow in putting away the clothes. He asked, "What information?" Mr. Mei glanced at him indifferently and asked, "Do you want to know the background of Xiao Bai's enemy?" Li Mu said, "Xuanzong's fourth-generation disciple." Mr. Mei crossed his arms and said, "Are you stupid? Xuanzong's fourth-generation disciples are also born and raised by their parents. I mean what country he is from, what his identity is, and who else is in his family." Li Mu paused and said, "Actually, I was just joking." I have already looked out for Sister May's clothes. These clothes are very suitable for your temperament, Shang Guanli asked. What about me? Li Mu waved his hand and said, Go away. You can choose after Sister May finishes. Shang Guanli took out a secret document from her sleeve and said, I have the information from Zhu Wei's investigation. Li Mu took a deep breath and a smile appeared on his face again. He said, Good Ali, how could I forget you? I was just joking just now. Of course you should choose first. With Sister May's age, there aren't many things here that she can wear. It won't be too late to choose later. In Changle Palace, Mr. May held some clothes and snorted, How can there be such a shameless person in the world? Shang Guanli glanced at him and said, A few days ago, you said that he dared to fight against transcendence with the Fate Realm. He was loyal and righteous. He was a trustworthy person. Li Mu held a secret document in his hand. It was sent from Xuanzong by Zhu Wei's spy. Li Mu did not expect that the imperial court spy would be placed in Xuanzong. This secret document recorded Qing Qingzi's identity in detail. Qing Qingzi's original name was Zhao Chen. He came from a cultivation family in Yan. The Yan kingdom was a small kingdom to the south of Zhuzhou. Its strength was very weak, far inferior to the Shin kingdom, the Jing kingdom, and the Yong kingdom. It was a vassal state of the Great Zhou. For the past 100 years, it had paid tribute to the Great Zhou in order to obtain the Great Zhou's protection and prevent other countries from annexing and invading it. Li Mu left the imperial palace and went directly to the Honglu Temple. Since the last tribute, all the countries in the south, except Yong, had sent envoys to the divine capital. After receiving Li Mu's order, the Honglu Temple official immediately sent for the Yan's envoy. A thin man quickly stepped into the room and said nervously, What instructions does your excellency have for this humble subject? Li Mu asked, Can you get in touch with the Yan imperial family? The thin man immediately nodded. Your excellency, we can, Yan imperial family. The envoy sent a message from the Great Zhou's divine capital, causing the entire Yan imperial family to panic. The son of the Zhao family was fortunate enough to join Xuanzong. This was supposed to be the glory of the Zhao family and the Yan imperial family. Unexpectedly, he was wanted by the Great Zhou court. The Yan imperial family was a vassal state of the Great Zhou. The Great Zhou court directly sent the document to the Yan imperial family. As the most powerful country in Zhuzhou, if the Great Zhou was angry, a small country like the Yan imperial family would be silently reduced to ashes. After receiving the message from the Great Zhou court, the Yan imperial family immediately held an emergency meeting and made a decision in the shortest time possible. The order from the Great Zhou could not be disobeyed. The Yan imperial family personally issued a decree ordering the Zhao family to immediately recall Zhao Chen. In the Zhao family, after the messenger left, the head of the Zhao family snorted and threw the imperial decree on the ground. He stepped on it and said, Bring me a sound-transmitting Dharma artifact. I want to ask Qing for his opinion. Xuanzong. Qing Qingzi knelt before Dao Qingzi and said worriedly, Grand Elder, the Great Zhou court is pressuring the Yan imperial family to force my father to hand me over. What should I do? A small country dares to ignore the Xuanzong. Dao Qingzi stood up and waved his sleeve. He said indifferently, In that case, let the Yan imperial family perish. Chapter 542. In the Taoist palace, Dao Qingzi ordered, Miao Xian, arrange a few disciples to help Qing Qingzi's family take over the Yan kingdom. A figure walked up and said respectfully, Yes, master. The Xuanzong elders were silent for a moment. One of them couldn't help but say, First elder, please reconsider. Our sect is detached from worldly affairs and has never interfered with the affairs of the secular countries. If we interfere with the internal affairs of the Yan kingdom, we will be criticized. Dao Qingzi said lightly, The Yan kingdom is a small country. They are willing to be the loyal dog of the Zhou dynasty and look down on the Xuanzong. If we don't punish them as an example, there will be others who don't know what's good for them in the future. I will show my power. No one is allowed to say anything. Tianjizi had personally ordered that the Grand Elder would take over after the sect master left the sect. The group of elders couldn't disobey his decision. The Grand Elder's personality wasn't good before, but it wasn't like this. Everyone faintly felt that he had lost all face in front of all the cultivators in the world. A demon had already formed in his heart, and it was causing his personality to change from extreme to even more extreme. If this continued, no one knew what would happen to Xuanzong. The more he wanted to protect the sect's reputation, the more the sect's reputation would be lost. If he had dealt with it impartially and handed over Qingqingzi, the sect's reputation would still be slightly damaged, but things wouldn't have turned out this way. All the dojos were taken back, the outer sect disciples were expelled, and the inner sect disciples were ostracized in the Great Zhou and the Yao Kingdom. In the hearts of all the cultivators, the 1,000-year-old sect's reputation was ruined. At this moment, many elders began to doubt whether Tianjizi's decision was right. Under the Grand Elders' arrangement, a few elders of the Fifth Realm left the sect quietly and went to the Yan Kingdom. A few days later, in the divine capital of the Great Zhou. In the morning court, the envoy of the Yan Kingdom knelt in the Ziwei Palace and begged, "The rebels of the Yan Kingdom have surrounded the palace. I am under the orders of the King of Yan to ask for help from the Shangguan Kingdom." Li Mu stood in front of the palace, looking surprised. His original intention was to put pressure on Qingqingzi's family through the imperial court of the Yan Kingdom, but he didn't expect that the Zhao family of the Yan Kingdom would rebel. He once asked the envoy of the Yan Kingdom. The Zhao family was only a mid-level cultivation family and did not have the power to rebel. The power controlled by the royal family of the Yan Kingdom was enough to destroy the Zhao family 10 times over. To be able to force the royal family of the Yan Kingdom into such a situation, there must be someone behind the Zhao family. Obviously, Xuanzong was the only one with such strength and a reason to help the Zhao family. The spies of the imperial court in Xuanzong sent back news that after Li Mu and the others left, the hierarch of Xuanzong, Miao Yunzi, also went out to travel. At this time, the person in charge of Xuanzong was the Grand Elder Taoist priest, Qingzi. With his personality, who valued face more than anything else, he was capable of doing such a thing. The request for help from the Yan Kingdom's envoy caused a huge commotion in the imperial court. After some discussion, a civil official said hesitantly, "Your Majesty, I think that this is the internal affairs of the Yan Kingdom. Great Zhou should not interfere." The Yan Kingdom was a vassal state of Great Zhou and paid tribute to Great Zhou every year. Great Zhou had the responsibility to protect the Yan Kingdom, but the premise was that the Yan Kingdom was invaded by foreign forces. If someone in the Yan Kingdom rebelled, it was the internal affairs of the Yan Kingdom. Since the founding of the Yan Kingdom, Great Zhou had not interfered in the internal affairs of other countries, except for the Shen Kingdom, which provoked the Yan Kingdom. This was the important reason why the southern countries had always been at ease with Great Zhou and paid tribute to the Yan Kingdom. This time, Great Zhou could send troops to help the Yan Kingdom with the reason of bringing order to the chaos. Next time, it might use other reasons to interfere in the internal affairs of other countries. Once this rule was broken, the southern countries would be in a state of panic, which was not good for the stability of the Zhou continent. After some discussion, the officials of Great Zhou unanimously decided that the Great Zhou would not send troops to the Yan Kingdom because of the internal strife. After the court, the officials of Great Zhou dispersed. The envoy of the Yan Kingdom walked out of the Ziwei Palace in a daze, his face full of sorrow. This was the sorrow of a small country. Being caught in the middle of the great powers, its fate was no longer in its own control. The Yan Kingdom would soon fall into the hands of the rebels. At this moment, a figure walked past him. Suddenly, something fell from his sleeve. The envoy of the Yan Kingdom picked up a stack of yellow paper talismans and called out to the young official of Great Zhou who had plunged the Yan Kingdom into a whirlpool. He said in a hoarse voice, "Sir, you dropped something." Li Mu turned his head and said lightly, "I didn't drop anything." The envoy of the Yan Kingdom was stunned for a moment. He looked down at the stack of paper talismans in his hand. The talismans on the Fulu were extremely complicated. He felt a little dizzy just by looking at them. The talisman paper seemed to be made of special materials. Each piece of Fulu seemed to contain boundless power. He had clearly dropped it just now. Why did he deny it? The young official had already walked far away. The envoy of the Yan Kingdom seemed to have realized something. He suddenly raised his head and his breathing began to quicken. Li Mu left the palace. He didn't go home. Instead, he went outside the city. Outside the city gate on the west side of the divine capital, there was a wide open space. The craftsmen of the Ministry of Works were busy. A super-large cultivation market was about to be built here. The major sects and cultivation families of the ancestral state were invited to move in. The purpose was to provide convenience for the cultivators of the ancestral state. They didn't have to travel thousands of miles to Xuanzong every 5 years. In the divine capital, they could exchange for or buy the cultivation supplies they needed at any time. The imperial court also wouldn't charge them 30 to 50% of their turnover. They only had to pay a certain amount of taxes on time and they could continue to operate here. On the open space, the craftsmen of the Ministry of Works were very busy. This time, the deadline was tight and the task was heavy. They needed to build a super-large market in a month's time. Such a huge project would have taken at least half a year to complete in the past. However, the imperial court was very fast this time. Within a day, the 3 provinces passed a resolution on the project. The Ministry of Revenue's funds were also sent in immediately. The craftsmen of the Ministry of Works came overnight to measure the site. Li Mu checked the progress of the project before returning home. When he was in Xuanzong, he promised the cultivators 3 months. Of course, Li Mu's goal wasn't to make a small profit but to attract business. He hoped that when the cultivators of the Zhu continent came to the divine capital 3 months later, they would be attracted by the bigger, more convenient, and cheaper cultivation market. They would completely forget about the wealth exchange in Xuanzong. Although he wanted to immediately let Xiaobai take revenge, he was still far from being able to face Xuanzong head-on. He could only weaken Xuanzong from the side and look for an opportunity later. In these 3 months, Li Mu recruited the heads of the Fulu school. They couldn't guarantee a 100% success rate for creating high-level Fulu talismans, but they could for low-level Fulu talismans. Li Mu kept the Fulu talismans above the earth level for himself. Those below the earth level were handed over to them. For the next few days, Li Mu stayed at home to draw talismans. On a flying boat from the Great Zhou to the Yen Kingdom, a man touched the Fulu in his arms with an anxious expression. He didn't hesitate to overdraw his mana to increase the flying boat's speed to the maximum. Yen Kingdom, Yen Capital. Recently, a major event happened in the Yen Kingdom, causing the citizens of the Yen Kingdom to panic. The famous Zhao family of the Yen Kingdom recruited a few powerful cultivators from somewhere and rebelled against the royal family. After defeating the royal family's guards, they forced the royal family into the palace. Until the royal family activated the protective array, the two sides were in a temporary stalemate. Several figures floated in the air and attacked the array that covered the palace. The light of spells illuminated the entire sky, but the array didn't show any abnormalities other than shaking slightly. The head of the Zhao family flew into the air and said to a middle-aged man, "Elder, the royal family bought this array from the Spirit Array sect at a high price in the early years. It is said that it can withstand the attacks of powerful cultivators from Dongxian." The middle-aged man looked down at the array outside the Yen Kingdom's palace and said calmly, "It can withstand the attacks of a 6th-level cultivator, but without a 6th-level cultivator, it will take a few days to break this array." The head of the Zhao family said, "I am worried about the Great Zhou court. The royal family must have asked the Great Zhou court for help. If the Great Zhou court sends troops," the middle-aged man said, "don't worry. This is a matter of the Yen Kingdom. The Great Zhou court will not send troops. If they do, the sect will not sit by and watch." The head of the Zhao family breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Then I am relieved." Inside the array, the royal family of the Yen Kingdom looked at the figures floating in the air with bitter expressions. An elder sighed and said, "I didn't expect Xuanzong to make a move. To deal with a small country like the Yen Kingdom, they sent several elders. They want to slap the Great Zhou's face, but the Yen Kingdom has suffered an unexpected calamity." The middle-aged man in the imperial robe said, "Now, we can only place our hopes on the Great Zhou court." The elder shook his head and said, "The Great Zhou court will not send troops. When the array is broken, the Yen Kingdom will change hands. We can only hate the fact that the Yen Kingdom is so weak that we can't even control our own destiny." Although the array bought by the royal family of the Yen Kingdom from the Spirit Array sect was strong, it could not withstand the continuous attacks of several 5th-level cultivators. In just 2 days, the array was at its limit. The head of the Zhao family floated in the air and looked at the array that was trembling violently under the attack of spells. A trace of passion appeared in his eyes. The Yen Kingdom would soon be under the Zhao family. In at most a few hours, the array would be broken. However, at this moment, a ray of light suddenly approached from afar. It was a flying boat. The head of the Zhao family was no stranger to the flying boat. He was the Yen Kingdom's permanent envoy to the Great Zhou. Only the envoy returned. The head of the Zhao family understood that the Great Zhou must not have sent troops. The smile on his face grew wider. As the smile appeared on his face, a rolling sound came from the front. Die, renegade. The envoy stood at the bow of the boat and threw out a few Fulu notes. Suddenly, several figures in golden armor appeared in the air. They held huge weapons and exuded an extremely powerful aura. The head of the Zhao family was stunned. He said in shock, "What is this?" Looking at the golden armored soldiers, the few Xian sect elders were also stunned. When they came back to their senses, the elder in the lead immediately said in horror, "It's a level 6 soldier. Retreat, retreat quickly." The news from the Yen Kingdom reached the fairies' capital 5 days later. In the Yen Kingdom, the Zhao family rebelled and forced the emperor to abdicate. In the end, the Zhao family was suppressed by the royal family. Because of the serious crime of rebellion, the entire Zhao family was executed. Only the son, Zhao Chengyuan, who was in Xuanzong, escaped. In the Li residence, Li Mu peeled an orange and fed Xiaobai and Wan Wan a slice each. That Qing Qingzi should be able to understand part of the pain that Xiaobai went through now, right? In Xuanzong, Qing Qingzi knelt on the ground with a blank expression. He had yet to recover from the heavy blow. His family failed to seize power and was executed by the royal family of the Yen Kingdom. Now, he was the only member of the Zhao family who was still alive. How could this be? How could this be? The Yen Kingdom was only a small kingdom. The most powerful person in the royal family was only at the 5th level. This time, the sect directly sent 5 5th-level elders. How could this fail? How could his family die? Dao Qingzi's face darkened. He asked, "What happened?" A 5th-level elder who came back from the Yen Kingdom said in grief and indignation, "It's the Golden Armor Divine Soldier Seal, a heaven-level Golden Armor Divine Soldier Seal." The royal family of the Yen Kingdom summoned 3 6th-level Divine Soldiers. We were no match for them at all. If they didn't intend to let us go, all the disciples would have died in the Yen Kingdom. Miao Xuanzi gritted his teeth and said, "Fulu School. It must be the Fulu School's interference. Other than them, who else can draw a heaven-level Golden Armor Divine Soldier Seal? The Fulu School forbids the sale of offensive heaven-level Golden Armor Divine Soldier Seals. How dare the Fulu School break the rules?" A Golden Armor Talisman could temporarily summon a 6th Realm Divine Soldier. With such a high-level combat power, it could easily annihilate most of the small and medium sects and small and medium countries, causing great chaos. Therefore, none of the Taoist sects were allowed to sell heaven-tier offensive talismans. This was the consensus of the 6 sections. Miao Xuanzi said coldly, "I'll go ask Xian Jizi and see how he explains it." He came to a Taoist palace and sat on a white jade chair. After activating it with his mana, Xian Jizi, who was preaching to his disciples in the Taoist palace on the main peak of the Fulu School in the north region, felt something and waved his hand. In the center of the Taoist palace, an illusory figure appeared out of thin air. Xian Jizi looked at the illusory figure below and asked, "Miao Xuanzi, what brings you here so suddenly?" Miao Xuanzi asked in a deep voice, "Xian Jizi, don't play dumb with me. Did your Fulu School give the Yen Kingdom a few Golden Armor Divine Soldier Seals? You should know that this kind of Fulu is forbidden to be sold." Xian Jizi denied, "Our sect has never sold the Golden Armor Divine Soldier Seals." Miao Xuanzi snorted, "Do you think you can recognize it? Other than your Fulu School, which other sects and families can draw heaven-level Fulu, and heaven-level Golden Armor Fulu at that?" Xian Jizi shook his head, Our sect has never sold the golden armor divine soldier seals, but a few days ago, junior brother Ling Jizi sent a message saying that the few high-level fulu he carried with him were stolen. Perhaps it was the thief who stole them and sold them. It has nothing to do with our fulu school, lost? Miao Xuanzi said angrily, Xian Jizi, do you think I'm a 3-year-old kid? Xian Jizi looked at him and said lightly, the runes of the golden armor divine soldier seals can be found in any introductory book of talisman Taoism. The world is so big that there are hidden dragons and crouching tigers. It's normal that a master who is good at talisman Taoism can draw this kind of talisman. Without any evidence, don't blame our fulu school for everything. Do you think that Xuanzong must be behind someone in the Yen Kingdom's rebel army who used high-level Taoist magic arts? Miao Xuanzi's lips moved, but he was speechless. Finally, he waved his sleeves and the projection gradually dissipated. Seeing him disappear, Xian Jizi took out his voice-transmitting celestial artifact. After activating it, he said, Junior brother, next time this kind of thing happens, remember to use a fulu that they have never seen before. Once the golden armor divine soldier seals are used, everyone will know it's our fulu school. Chapter 543. Li Mu was the cause of the Yen imperial family's calamity. Even if the Great Zhou couldn't send troops to help, Li Mu wouldn't just sit by and watch. The 6 Taoist sects were detached from worldly affairs and never participated in worldly struggles for imperial power. It was Dao Qingzi who broke the rules of the cultivation world first, so Li Mu couldn't be blamed for his carelessness. In fact, Li Mu already knew that fulu weapons above the heavenly level were prohibited from being sold. This was the consensus of the 6 sections. The golden armor talisman wasn't like the creation talisman. Although both fulu weapons were at the heavenly level, one could save lives while the other could take lives. Having a heavenly level golden armor talisman was equivalent to having a powerful cultivator from Dongxian, who could destroy more than half of the small countries in the south. If this kind of fulu could be bought with money, the cultivation world would be in complete chaos. However, Li Mu didn't accept the money from the Yen imperial envoy, so it wasn't considered selling. Moreover, he was standing on the side of justice and had a clear conscience. The Zhao family's rebellion had been destroyed, and Xuanzong was at his wits' end. If Dao Qingzi was crazy enough to send a 6th realm elder to interfere with the Yan's affairs, all the countries in the Zhu province, including the Great Zhou, would unite to resist Xuanzong. The imperial courts of the various countries and the Taoist sects had always minded their own business. No matter which country it was, the imperial court didn't want to have a power above their country. Even the Great Zhou wouldn't interfere with the internal affairs of other countries. Li Mu and Xuanzong had been at odds ever since Dao Qingzi chose to protect Qin Qingzi. Unfortunately, he didn't have a Dao integration cultivator by his side. Otherwise, he could have led his men to Xuanzong's mountain gate and forced them to hand over Qin Qingzi. Li Mu also realized that his own strength and that of the fulu school were still too weak. Otherwise, Xuanzong wouldn't have dared to offend the fulu school for an inner disciple. All along, every step he took had been smooth sailing. The conflict with Xuanzong was his first major setback. Xiao Bai's enemy was in Xuanzong, but Li Mu couldn't avenge her. These days, he had been blaming himself. This was probably the first time that Li Mu was so eager to improve himself and the people around him. The cultivation market in the divine capital had to be set up successfully. Li Mu needed enough spiritual jades and spiritual herbs to raise the overall cultivation of the talisman sect's disciples to a whole new level. At the very least, in terms of the number of middle and high-tier disciples, they would not lose to the profound sect. As for the 8th realm cultivators, there was no way. Over the past 10,000 years, the spiritual qi in this world had become thinner and thinner. It was no longer possible for a 9th realm cultivator to be born. Even 8th realm cultivators were hard to come by. Other than Tianjizi of the Shen sect, there was no other 8th realm cultivator in Taoism. The only sect that could have an 8th realm cultivator was the demon sect. However, Li Mu couldn't work with the demon sect. This notorious organization was the enemy of all righteous sections. Fortunately, the only person on the continent who had a chance of reaching the 8th realm was one of Li Mu's closest people. Today, the Empress was wearing a piece of clothing that Li Mu gave her. She leaned lazily on the dragon throne and read the latest novel. As the continent's youngest 7th realm cultivator, Li Mu hadn't seen her cultivate. If the Empress had an 8th realm cultivation, why would he need to work so hard to accumulate strength and wait for Xiao Bai to avenge her? He would have brought people to fight Xuanzong long ago. Zhou Yi felt Li Mu's gaze. She put down her book and asked, "Why are you looking at me?" If the Empress was willing to work hard, he wouldn't have to. Li Mu thought for a moment and said, "There's no point in always reading. Why don't your Majesty cultivate and try to break through as soon as possible?" Inside Xuanzong. Inside a Taoist palace, Qing Qingzi knelt on the ground with a crazed expression. He gritted his teeth and said, "Grand Supreme Elder, the Yan Kingdom's royal family humiliated our Xuanzong. I beg you to send the chief elder to the Yan Kingdom to kill the Yan Kingdom's royal family and raise the prestige of our Xuanzong." Dao Qingzi glanced at him and said, "Take him away and make him face the wall for 10 years. He's not allowed to step out of Discipline Peak for 10 years. Qing Qingzi was obviously crazy. If he killed the Yan Kingdom's royal family, Xuanzong would become the most powerful sect of the evil Dao. This was not what Dao Qingzi wanted. The 4th-generation core disciples in the palace watched Qing Qingzi being taken away. Qing Xuanzi's face was even paler than Qing Qingzi's. He was glad that he didn't fight Li Mu to the death. Otherwise, he would have been the crazy one. Dao Qingzi sat on the main seat. He closed his eyes and said, "You can all leave." The disciples bowed and left the Taoist palace. When Dao Qingzi was the only one left in the palace, the door of the Taoist palace slowly closed. Darkness shrouded Dao Qingzi. At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded in Dao Qingzi's ears. "Are you angry and unwilling to accept this?" Dao Qingzi's expression changed. He shouted, "Who is it? Come out." He scanned with his divine will but didn't find a second aura. At this moment, the voice sounded again. "Don't look for me. I'm in your heart. You're me and I'm you." Dao Qingzi had cultivated for more than 100 years. He knew what he had encountered. Even with his cultivation and temperament, his face couldn't help but turn pale. The voice continued, "I know you're angry and unwilling to accept this. Among all the disciples, you're the most talented. You were the first to reach the creation realm, the first to step into Dongxian, and the first to transcend. However, your biased masters still passed the position of sect master to someone else. You thought that if you were the sect master, Xuanzong would have been better than it is now." The voice laughed. "However, when you took control of Xuanzong, you realized that things weren't like that. As the Grand Supreme Elder, you were humiliated by a 5th realm junior in front of countless cultivators on the Zhu continent. Xuanzong's dojo was taken away, the outer sect disciples were expelled, and the inner sect disciples were ostracized by the demon race. You're in charge of the strongest sect in the Zhu province, but you can't even do anything about a small country. Your life is a joke." Dao Qingzi's eyes were bloodshot. He said furiously, "Shut up. I'm the Grand Supreme Elder of Xuanzong, a 7th realm cultivator. I'm second only to one person and above millions." The voice laughed even louder. "Do you believe what you're saying? If you don't think you're a joke, why would I appear? Even if you have everything you want now, you can't even do anything to a junior. Isn't this a joke? Shut up, shut up, shut up." In the Holy Ji Palace at the highest point of the Xian sect, angry roars could be heard. Countless disciples of the Xian sect looked up and were terrified. They did not know why the Grand Elder was so angry. When the headmaster was here, such a situation had never happened. They didn't know when the sect master would return. They really didn't know what kind of path the Grand Supreme Elder would make Xuanzong walk on. Just as the Xuanzong disciples were thinking about their sect master, Miao Yunzi, the Xuanzong sect master, was meditating in a silent space of the flask heaven. At a certain moment, he opened his eyes and looked at the old man opposite him. He asked, "Martial Granduncle, why didn't you follow the sect rules and hand Qing Qingzi over to the Fulu school? What did you see?" The old man was silent for a long time. Finally, he said, "Catastrophe." Miao Yunzi's eyes narrowed. Martial Granduncle Tianjizi had predicted 2 catastrophes for the sect. If it weren't for his warning and the sect being prepared, Xuanzong would have already been destroyed by the demon Dao. It was because of this that the Xuanzong disciples trusted him so much. Miao Yunzi took a deep breath and asked, "What kind of catastrophe?" The old man said slowly, "The fall of the dynasty, the end of the 6 sects, the collapse of the 10 continents, a world-ending catastrophe." Miao Yunzi asked in shock, "Just because Xuanzong handed Qin Qingzi over?" The old man said, "This is the mystery of fate. Something that seems insignificant now can cause a huge change in the future." Miao Yunzi thought for a moment and asked, "Can this catastrophe be stopped if we don't hand over Qin Qingzi?" A light appeared in the old man's empty eyes. He murmured, "No, but this is the only chance." Miao Yunzi shook his head. "Disciples still can't imagine." The old man smiled. "I can't imagine either. Cultivate well. Fortune can be a disaster, disaster can be a blessing. No one can say for sure. It's a catastrophe, but it's also an opportunity." Chapter 544. In the sky above the divine capital, in the 9 heavens squall layer, Li Mu sat cross-legged in the air with his upper body naked, allowing the biting cold squall to blow on his body. After using the squall to train his physical body for a while, he used his magic to prop up a shield and continued to fly upwards. Flying past Shangguan Li, Li Mu continued to fly upwards. A trace of defiance flashed through Shangguan Li's eyes. After moving upwards for a distance with difficulty, she fell several meters under the huge pressure and landed back at her original position. Knowing that Li Mu's cultivation had far surpassed hers, she could only sit cross-legged where she was obediently. Before Li Mu started cultivating, she had already reached the 5th level with the help of the Empress. Now, Li Mu was only 1 step away from the 6th level, and she was still stuck at the 5th level. Sighing softly in her heart, Shangguan Li closed her eyes and continued to channel her magic, enduring the huge pressure brought by the squall. Li Mu floated several meters above Shangguan Li and sat cross-legged again. This was about the limit of his magic power. He looked up and saw another figure sitting cross-legged in the distance. After Xuanzong was taught a lesson, Li Mu deliberately realized his own slack. If he could use half of the time he usually spent fooling around and flirting to cultivate, he might not be so passive when he encountered similar situations again. Not only did Li Mu become diligent, but he also pulled the Empress to cultivate with him. Refining his body for 2 hours, tempering his magic power for 2 hours, practicing painting for 2 hours, writing talismans, and dealing with political affairs. He spent 12 hours with the Empress every day. The remaining 12 hours, besides sleeping, were spent with his family and learning dragon language from Cheng Exin. Strictly speaking, sleeping was also considered cultivation. The speed of dual cultivation, especially Li Mu and Lu Hanyan's, was far faster than guiding and cultivating qi. Unfortunately, Li Mu's cultivation seemed to have encountered a bottleneck. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't see any hope of breaking through. Going from Zhaohua to Dongxian was the first natural chasm on the path of cultivation. Other than hard work in cultivation, to a certain extent, it also depended on luck. If the luck was there, one could break through the realm. If the luck was not there, one could be trapped for life. In addition to breaking through to the next realm, Li Mu was faced with another problem. Outside of Luoyang, the largest cultivation market on the Zhu continent was being built quickly. When the time came, thousands of cultivators from all over the Zhu continent would come to collect their fulu. When the market was completed, there would be no shortage of customers. What they lacked was merchants. A market that could accommodate hundreds of shops couldn't just have one fulu pavilion. The imperial court needed to attract important businesses, such as the Pill Cauldron sect, the Spirit Array sect, the South sect, the North sect, and so on. If they could get the support of these 4 sects, they wouldn't have to worry about the market's future customers. The problem was that the Great Zhou court was obviously making an enemy out of Xuanzong. The Fulu school and Xuanzong had shed all pretense of cordiality, but the other sects hadn't. After all, the Taoist sects were one family. They couldn't help outsiders against their own family for a little benefit, even if the imperial court took 20% less of their profits than Xuanzong. If they couldn't convince these 4 sects, then the market that was about to be built in Luoyang would be a joke. Li Mu didn't have any relationship with these 4 sects, nor did he have such great influence. He could only place his hopes on Xianjizi. For this reason, Li Mu personally returned to Mount Baiyun to discuss this matter with him. Hearing Li Mu's words, Yuzenzi shook his head and said, "This is very difficult. The other 4 sects have no enmity or grudge with Xuanzong. The great Zhou and Xuanzong are at loggerheads. They won't help outsiders and offend their own sect. Apart from our relationship with the Pill Cauldron sect, we don't have too deep of a relationship with the other sections. On the contrary, Xuanzong has a lot of contact with them." Li Mu had anticipated this situation before he came. He could only say, "Let's convince as many as we can first." The relationship between the Fulu school and the Pill Cauldron sect was indeed a bit closer. Back in Xuanzong, Li Mu and the Pill Cauldron sect's senior sister Jade Sun chatted happily. Once, the Fulu school even wrote a heavenly secret talisman for the Pill Cauldron sect. Li Mu had even comprehended the heavenly book of the Pill Cauldron sect. Xianjizi thought for a moment and said, "Then junior sister, you go and contact senior sister Wuchen." Yuzenzi looked at him with a strange expression, but didn't say anything. He left the Dao Palace. Li Mu knew that the 6 sects had a special magic item that could transmit projections over long distances. The 6 sects often used this method to hold important meetings. Not long after Yuzenzi left, he came back and said to Xianjizi, "Senior sister Wuchen said that if you want to discuss this matter, she wants you to go to the Pill Cauldron sect personally." Xianjizi said decisively, "Nonsense. If the headmaster of a sect could leave the sect at will, I would have gone with you to Xuanzong last time. You go to the Pill Cauldron sect in my place." Yuzenzi shook his head and said, "Senior sister said it very clearly. If you don't go to the Pill Cauldron sect personally, there is no possibility of discussion." Li Mu instinctively felt that there was something hidden in this matter. Xianjizi seemed to be very resistant to going to the Pill Cauldron sect. Before he could ask, Grand Elder Taiyangzi walked in from outside and said to Xianjizi, "You go. In the past, we 2 old fellows weren't here. Now that we 2 old fellows have returned, even if you leave the sect for a year and a half, nothing will happen." Xianjizi still wanted to say something, but Grand Elder continued, "Our Fulu school and Xuanzong have already reached this point. As the headmaster, you should think more about the sect." Xianjizi was silent for a moment, then sighed and said, "Disciple understands." Li Mu had never seen Xianjizi like this. Seeing him leave with a heavy heart, Li Mu was suspicious. He asked Yuzenzi, "What happened to senior brother?" Yuzenzi shook his head and said helplessly, "Because the Pill Cauldron sect's senior sister Yuzenzi likes senior brother, and senior brother wholeheartedly wants to revitalize the sect. He doesn't want to be burdened by love affairs. Senior sister Yuzenzi's talent is outstanding, but because of this, she is unable to transcend." Li Mu finally understood why when he and Xuanzong had a conflict, Xianjizi got the news from Yuzenzi. However, to be honest, love affairs will indeed affect cultivation and the revitalization of the sect. If one only knew how to talk about love every day, how could one have time to cultivate? How could one have time to plan the future of the sect? No one knew this better than Li Mu. Being immersed in the land of warmth and tenderness all day will greatly breed laziness. Perhaps the Pill Cauldron sect wanted to facilitate the 2 of them to become Dao companions. Li Mu didn't know whether Xianjizi didn't like Yuzenzi or was worried about the sect. If it was the former, then Li Mu also didn't want him to sacrifice himself for the sect. Feelings can't be forced. After all, Xianjizi wasn't a lecherous person like Li Mu. Forcing him to spend his life with a woman he didn't like was rather too cruel. Li Mu walked out of the Dao Palace and saw Xianjizi standing alone at the edge of a distant cliff. The mountain wind blew his Dao robe, making this figure appear particularly lonely. Li Mu walked to the edge of the cliff and said, "Regarding senior apprentice sister Yuzenzi, what does senior apprentice brother think in your heart?" Xianjizi said deeply, "Before master's lifespan ended, he gave the Fulu school to me. What I bear is not a love affair, but the rise and fall of the sect. As the headmaster, I must live up to the responsibility on my shoulders, live up to master's dying wishes, live up to the ancestors of the Fulu school, and revitalize the sect." Standing together with Xianjizi, Li Mu suddenly felt somewhat ashamed. He was also a disciple of the Fulu school and the future headmaster, but he didn't have the same sense of responsibility and mission as Xianjizi. He never took the initiative to think about doing anything for the Fulu school. To strengthen the sect, to fulfill the wishes of the ancestors, to make the Fulu school the #1 sect of the Tao, for someone like him who controlled countless resources, this clearly wasn't too difficult a matter. Li Mu took a deep breath, and in his heart he strengthened a certain belief. He looked at Xianjizi and said, "If senior apprentice brother trusts me, then hand the sect over to me. I will do my best to revitalize the Fulu school." Xianjizi suddenly turned around and walked towards the Tao Palace in large strides. He said, "Senior apprentice brother, change your clothes. You also prepare to go to the Pill Cauldron school." Immediately. Li Mu stood in the mountain wind, looking at Xianjizi's back as he left with large strides. His expression was somewhat chaotic. Chapter 545. Li Mu suspected that he had fallen into Xianjizi's trap. It wasn't the first time he wanted to be a headmaster who didn't do anything. When he saw Xianjizi driving the spirit boat towards the Danding sect at the fastest speed, he was even more certain of this idea. He was still too inexperienced and had accidentally fallen into the trap of these old foxes. But this time, Li Mu was willing to fall into the trap. He wanted to make Fulu school the #1 sect in the world, not to be above everyone like Xuanzong, but to not be bullied by anyone or any power. The Danding sect was located in the Liang state in the south of the Zhou continent. Although the Central Plains was vast and had more believers, the Central dynasty was also very powerful. Successive dynasties were very wary of cultivation sections. Therefore, Fulu school was in the far north, Xuanzong was in the far east, and the other 4 Taoist sects chose to establish their orthodoxy in the small southern countries. Liang State, Mount Jihua, Danding sect's ancestral court. On this trip to Mount Jihua, Li Mu and Yu Zhenzi were also accompanying sect master Xianjizi. The flying boat passed through the Danding sect's mountain gate and landed directly on the main peak. Li Mu had just seen from the sky that there were neat medicinal fields on each peak of Mount Jihua. The Danding sect started out by refining pills and relied more on spiritual herbs than Fulu school. Since the establishment of the sect, they had been growing all kinds of spiritual herbs. In the square in front of the Taoist palace in the center of the main peak, many Danding sect disciples bowed to them. Li Mu followed Xianjizi into the main peak's Taoist palace and saw several figures when he looked up. Most of the disciples of the Danding sect were female cultivators, and they were all good at maintaining their beauty. The elders didn't look much different from young women. Several female elders stood behind a woman who looked slightly older. That woman wore a crown on her head. She was the headmaster of the Danding sect, Wuchenzi. Jade's son stood behind Wuchenzi. Ever since the 3 of them entered the Taoist palace, her gaze never left Xianjizi. Xianjizi cupped his fists at Wuchenzi and smiled. "It's been a long time since we last met. Senior sister's cultivation has become even more profound." Wu Chenzi coldly looked at him and got straight to the point. "Xianjizi, today I can clearly tell you that if you want the Pill Cauldron sect to help you, you must become Tao companions with junior sister Jade's son. Otherwise, you should hurry back to where you came from." Jade's son grabbed Wu Chenzi's hand and begged, "Senior sister, don't do this." Wu Chenzi turned around and glared at her, saying, "You're not allowed to talk." Xianjizi smiled and said, "That's why I came today." He looked at Jade's son and slowly extended his hand, asking in a soft voice, "Junior sister Jadeson, are you willing to become my Tao companion?" They didn't expect Xianjizi to be so straightforward. Wu Chenzi and the elders of the Danding school looked at Xianjizi in astonishment. Jade's son Zi was stunned for a moment. Even the strongest man in Dongxian couldn't control his emotions, and 2 lines of clear tears flowed down his cheeks. Xianjizi reached out his hand and gently wiped her tears, saying, "It's my fault for making you wait for so long." Seeing this scene, Li Mu, Yu Zhenzi, and the people of the Danding school tactfully withdrew from the Tao palace, leaving the space for the 2 of them. The lovers finally got married. This was something that made everyone happy and joyful. The elder of the Danding school became the wife of the headmaster of the Fulu school. The 2 schools were as close as a family. Judging from Wu Chenzi's domineering love for Jade's son Zi, whether or not the 2 schools could unite would depend on Xianjizi. This was something that Li Mu was very concerned about. This was because the alliance with the Danding School was the most important part of his plan for the future of the Fulu School. The greatest use of the Fulu was to defend against the enemy. Although the pills could also be used as magic treasures, the most important use was to increase one's cultivation. If the two schools could work together, one would be in charge of external affairs and the other would be in charge of internal affairs. The strength of the schools would be greatly improved in a short period of time. Of course, the premise of all this was that both the Fulu School and the Danding School had an endless supply of books, talismans, and alchemy materials. This would depend on the market in the fairies' capital. 3 months later, once the new market was approved by the cultivators of the Zhu continent, the two schools would no longer have to worry about materials based on the cultivators' reliance on the Fulu and pills. Li Mu stood outside the Dao Palace on the main peak of the Danding School. He was planning the future of the two schools in his mind. Suddenly, a strange wave of mana came from the Dao Palace behind him. At the same time, the surrounding heaven and earth energy also began to move. Yuzhen was shocked and muttered, "So fast." Wuchenzi's face was filled with excitement. Li Mu still didn't know what had happened until he sensed 2 auras of the 7th level from the Dao Palace. One was Xianjizi and the other was Jade Sun Zi. Like Yuzhen, Jade Sun Zi of the Danding School had accepted the school's legacy many years ago. However, Yuzhen had already reached the Transcendence realm a few years ago. Due to the unresolved knot in her heart, her cultivation had remained at Dongxian. Now that the knot in her heart had been resolved, her ascension was just a matter of time. All these years, Xianjizi's greatest contribution was to bring a 7th-level cultivator to the Fulu School. Including the 2 Grand Supreme Elders, the number of 7th-level cultivators in the Fulu School had caught up to Xuanzong for the time being. Yuzhen saluted Sect Master Wuchen and smiled. "Congratulations, senior sister. The Danding School has another Transcendence Realm cultivator." Wuchen glanced at the Dao Palace and said, "I'm afraid I should be the one congratulating the Fulu School." Li Mu smiled and said, "The Fulu Danding School and Fulu School are as close as a family. Congratulations to you, congratulations to you." Wuchen looked at him and said, "This must be junior brother Ling Jizi who caused a ruckus in Xuanzong, right?" Xianjizi was the main character in this trip to the Danding School. Li Mu didn't have the time to introduce himself. He saluted and said, "Ling Jizi greets senior sister Wuchen. Wuchen said, "Junior brother Ling Jizi is extremely talented and courageous. No wonder the 2 martial uncles of the Fulu School think so highly of you." Just as she finished speaking, 2 figures walked out of the Dao Palace hand in hand. Jade Sun Zi's aura was completely different from before. She held Xianjizi's hand tightly with a shy look on her face. She was already a few decades old, but she still looked like a little girl who had just experienced her first awakening of love. Wuchen glanced at Xianjizi and went straight to the point. Yuzhen said that the Danding School should open a Danding Pavilion in the Great Zhou's Shendu. Xianjizi only smiled and said, "Senior sister and junior brother Ling Jizi can discuss this matter." With that, he held Jade Sun Zi's hand and the 2 disappeared into the clouds. Wuchen looked at Li Mu and was slightly shocked. She knew that Ling Jizi was valued in the Fulu School, but she didn't expect him to be valued to this extent. Xianjizi clearly thought of him as the next headmaster of the Fulu School and a future headmaster who would be in charge from now on. She glanced at Li Mu and said, "Come with me." Li Mu and her walked into the Dao Palace. Wuchen walked to the center of the hall before turning around and asking, "Do you know that what you are about to do will cause the Fulu School and Xuanzong to have no room for negotiation?" Li Mu smiled and said, "Is there a way to turn things around now?" The 3 transcendent experts of the Fulu School caused trouble in Xuanzong. Li Mu made Xuanzong's Grand Elder lose face in front of countless cultivators of the Zhu continent. The Empress expelled the Fulu School's outer disciples and used their training grounds to raise livestock. There was no room for negotiation between them and Xuanzong. Wuchen didn't ask any further and said, "Xianjizi asked you to discuss with me, which means that you alone can take charge of the Fulu School. Since you have decided, I won't try to persuade you anymore. From now on, the Fulu Danding School is a family. If you need the Danding School to do anything, just tell me. Wu Chunzi was the head of the Danding School. If she could say these words, it meant that the Danding School had chosen to stand with the Fulu School in the face of Xuanzong. Li Mu pondered for a moment and then looked at her and said, "This matter isn't urgent. Today is the day that senior brother Xianjizi and senior sister Jade Sun become Dao companions. Junior brother has a gift for the Danding School." He extended his hand and a jade slip appeared in his palm. He handed the jade slip to Wu Chunzi with both hands. Wu Chunzi took it and inadvertently scanned it with her divine sense. Her expression completely froze. She suddenly looked at Li Mu and said in shock, "This?" Li Mu smiled and said, "This is a small gift. It's not enough to show my respect." Chapter 546. Li Mu had comprehended the heavenly book of the Danding School a long time ago. The reason why he didn't take it out before was because he was a disciple of the Fulu School. Of course, he didn't want other schools to grow stronger. But now, the Danding School and the Fulu School were like family. He didn't need to hide these things anymore. His opponent was the Xian sect, the #1 sect of Taoism, which was filled with powerful cultivators. Only when the Talisman sect and the Elixir sect were strong enough would he have more chips in his hands to fight against the Xian sect in the future. Wu Chunzi looked at the jade slip in her hand. It was as light as a feather, but also as heavy as 10,000 pounds. The Danding School's knowledge of alchemy was passed down to this day. Part of it came from the heavenly book, while the other part came from the enlightenment of the seniors of the school over thousands of years. This was the foundation of the Danding School. The jade slip wasn't big, but the information in it was extremely rich. It contained all the knowledge of alchemy that the Danding School's disciples had comprehended from the heavenly book. There were also countless prescriptions, alchemy notes, and enlightenment that she had never seen before. The Danding School had the hope of reaching the top of Taoism in a limited time if they obtained this item. Was this the small gift that Ling Jizi had mentioned? The small gift he had mentioned was the road to prosperity for the Danding School. She had thought that the Fulu School would benefit from the marriage of her junior sister and Xianjizi. She hadn't expected that the Danding School would benefit the most. Even someone as calm as Wu Chunzi couldn't help but tremble as she held the jade slip. She pursed her lips and looked at Li Mu. "Junior brother, I'm afraid the Pill Cauldron sect won't be able to repay such a generous gift." Li Mu smiled again and interrupted her, saying, "Senior sister, you're treating me as an outsider. Our two sects are as close as a family. Senior sister, you even offended Xuanzong for us." "This is nothing, Mount Jiahua." On the main peak of the Danding School, the sound of bells suddenly rang. The bell tolled 9 times. At first, the disciples didn't pay much attention to it, but when the 9th bell tolled, all of the disciples and elders in the Pill Cauldron sect stopped what they were doing and hurried toward the main peak, with the exception of the elders who were at a critical juncture in their pill concocting. The sky around the main peak was filled with figures flying in the air. Everyone stood on the dojo in front of the main peak according to their seniority. The 9 chimes of the bell meant that all the disciples in the sect were being summoned. Something important must have happened in the sect, or the sect leader had something important to announce. Wu Chunzi walked out of the Holy Ji Palace. All the disciples bowed and said, "Greetings, headmaster." Wu Chunzi stood in front of the Dao Palace and slowly announced, "Just now, Elder Jadesun has transcended." "What? Elder Jadesun has finally advanced. With that, our sect will have 4 7th realms. Xuanzong only has 5 7th realms. Aren't we very close to Xuanzong?" Everyone in the dojo heard the news. Whether they were low-level disciples or elders, they immediately jumped for joy. The Danding School only had 3 7th realms in the past. The 2 Grand Supreme Elders were nearing the end of their lifespans. If the sect leader hadn't advanced, there would only be 1 Supreme Powerhouse left after the 2 Grand Supreme Elders reached the end of their lifespans. They would immediately fall to the bottom of the 6 sections. Now that Elder Jadesun had advanced, even if the 2 Grand Supreme Elders died, the overall strength of the Danding School wouldn't fall too much. Wu Chunzi raised her hand, and the dojo quieted down again. She looked at the disciples of the Danding School and continued, "There's one more thing. Elder Jadesun has already become Dao companions with the sect leader of the Fulu School, Jizi. The Tao Companion ceremony will be held soon. The moment she said that, the dojo fell silent for a moment. Then, an even greater uproar broke out. Did I hear wrongly? Elder Jade's son and the sect leader of the Fulu school have become Tao companions. This is too sudden. I've never heard of this before. The dojo was as noisy as a bustling market. These two pieces of news brought too much shock to the disciples of the Fulu school. An elder of the sect had advanced to the seventh realm and become Tao companions with the sect leader of another sect. Two joyous events had come at the same time in one day. Many disciples were still in a daze. After announcing these two major events, Wuxia gave them some time to digest the news. She spoke again, "Peak heads, follow me in for a discussion." For this discussion, Wuxia and the peak heads discussed for 3 whole days. The disciples of the Danding school didn't know what the peak heads and the sect leader were discussing. However, after 3 days, the peak heads finished their discussion and returned to their peaks to warn the disciples. Elder Jade's son was about to become Tao companions with the sect leader of the Fulu school. From then on, the Danding school and the Fulu school would be as close as one family. The disciples of the Danding school had to help each other in the future. They had to treat the Fulu school disciples the same way they treated their own disciples. Their seventh realm elder and the sect leader of another sect had become Tao companions. If the disciples of the two sects still held grudges against each other, they would lose face for their own sections. There was no need for the peak heads to warn them about these things. At this time, in the Taoist palace on the main peak, Wuxia said to a peak head, "Hung Yangzi, go down the mountain personally and pay a visit to the imperial family of the state of Liang and the sects and aristocratic families of the state of Liang that are on good terms with us. Ask them if they have any intention of setting up a shop in the Great Zhou's Shindu." Li Mu knew very well that the ask that Wuxia spoke of was definitely not just asking. Although they were both part of the 6 great Taoist sects, the Danding sect's position in the state of Liang was completely different from the Fulu school and Xuanzong's position in the Great Zhou. Without the Fulu school and Xuanzong, the Great Zhou was still the most powerful country in the Zhou province. Without the Danding sect, the state of Liang was reduced to the bottom of the southern countries, not much stronger than the state of Yen and other small countries. As long as the Danding sect spoke, the imperial family of the state of Liang and all the sects and aristocratic families, big and small, would definitely give them face. Li Mu cupped his hands towards Wuxia and said, "Thank you, senior sister." Wuxia smiled and said, "2 sects and 1 family, this is how it should be." This time, Li Mu stayed at the Danding sect for longer than expected. The main reason was that Jianghu didn't want to go back. He and Jade's son were nowhere to be seen all day long. No one knew where they were going to be lovey-dovey. Added together, they were almost 200 years old. Now was the first spring, but their spirits were no less than those of young people. However, Li Mu couldn't stay here any longer. The support of the Danding sect was not enough. He still had to find a way to obtain the support of other powers. When Li Mu was about to leave, the space around him fluctuated. Jianghu appeared beside him and asked, "Junior brother, you're leaving?" Li Mu nodded and said, "I'm going to the Yao country." The other 3 sects had no other choice. They could only use the Jianghu country to make up the numbers. There was no Yao country, but it was rich in spiritual medicine and minerals. These were resources that the cultivation world of the Zhou continent lacked. It wasn't easy for Li Mu to come out, so he wanted to see Huanji again. He didn't want her to think that Li Mu had forgotten about her after putting on his clothes. Before leaving, Li Mu didn't give up and asked Jianghu, "Senior brother, do you have any junior sisters or senior sisters in the Spirit Formation sect, South sect, and North sect?" Jianghu glanced at him and said, "Do you think I'm like you, having lovers everywhere?" Li Mu did not like to hear these words. If it were not for the fact that he had connections everywhere, where would the heavenly secret talismans that had been used to extend the lives of the 2 grand elders had come from? Regardless of whether it was the Empress or Huanji, they would not have given him face as the leader of the talisman puppet sect. The 2 grand elders would probably have already passed on their transcendence powers by now, riding on cranes to the west. Li Mu waved his hand and said, "I'm leaving." He flew up and headed north. However, as soon as he left Mount Jiahua, a ray of light flew past him. It didn't stop at all and headed straight for the Danding sect. Li Mu stopped and looked back at the figure in the ray of light. From the speed and aura of that person, it was a cultivator from Dongxian. A 6th-level cultivator was rushing to the Danding sect. He didn't know why. He had already told Huan Ji that he was going to the Yao country. He didn't want to think about it anymore and continued to fly north. Mount Jiahua. A ray of light shot from the distance and landed on the main peak. Wu Chenzi walked out from the Dao Palace and looked at a man. She asked, "Guang Yuanzi, what happened? Why are you in such a hurry?" The man in a Taoist robe walked forward and anxiously said, "Senior Sister Wuchen, the Spirit Formation sect has something to ask of you." Chapter 547. Thousand Fox City. The diligent queen hadn't attended morning court for 3 days. It was almost noon when Li Mu woke up from the bed in the harem. Phantom Princess was still sleeping soundly in his arms. The 6-tailed fox demon's seductive skills were irresistible. He had been trapped in the fox's seductive attacks for 3 days and 3 nights. However, Li Mu didn't forget that he was here for serious business. He couldn't indulge himself like this anymore. Li Mu decided to keep a distance from this seductive body for the time being. Phantom Princess suddenly turned over and pressed her soft body tightly against his. Li Mu changed his mind at the last minute. From tomorrow onward, he would keep a distance from her. Thousand Fox City, in front of the palace. Commander Hu Lu just told the demon officials that the morning court was cancelled again. The queen hadn't attended morning court for 5 days. The demon officials could only return to their offices. At this time, Li Mu wasn't sleeping in the bed in the harem. Instead, he was making jade slips. He gave Phantom Princess the heavenly book of the demon race to recruit the big and small demon races. However, it was too difficult for them to comprehend it on their own. Many demons couldn't comprehend anything at all. Li Mu simply engraved the contents of the heavenly book on a jade slip like he did with the Pill Cauldron sect. He asked her to teach it according to the demon race that submitted to her. As for the heavenly book of the fox race, Li Mu had already given it to her. The lesson he learned from Xuanzong last time reminded Li Mu that he couldn't be strong alone. He also needed reliable helpers and a strong alliance behind him. In the future, he should supervise the queen's cultivation more. When she reached the 8th level, Li Mu could do whatever he wanted in the 10 continents and 3 islands. There was also Phantom Princess. The Heavenly Fox race was one of the top races. They weren't inferior to the Dragon race. It wasn't good for her to indulge in beauty all day long. Li Mu walked to the bed and patted her smooth body. "Wake up. It's time to cultivate." Hu Lu had already made arrangements for the Jianghu kingdom to open a store in the divine capital. Aside from spiritual herbs, the Yao kingdom also had some specialties that human cultivators urgently needed. For example, the silk of the silkworm demon clan was a material used to make immortal garments. If sold to the imperial court or the northern faction, they could be refined into immortal garments with defensive capabilities. This kind of clothing was extremely popular in the cultivation world. Hu Lu had already informed the silkworm demon clan to provide some silk every once in a while. Of course, the silkworm demon clan's treatment here would also be greatly improved. When Li Mu was inscribing the jade slip, Huan Ji was lying on top of him. Li Mu wanted her to cultivate, but she said that after he left, she would have plenty of time to cultivate. Li Mu could only let her be. After all, he did not have many opportunities to come to the Yao nation. Huan Ji hugged him from behind and rested her head on Li Mu's shoulder. Sometimes she would blow on his neck and sometimes she would kiss him on the cheek. She was completely a clingy little fairy. Suddenly, there was a sound of vibration in the storage space. Feeling the soft body lying on his back, Li Mu felt an inexplicable sense of guilt. When he discovered that it was not the Empress who was transmitting her voice, but rather the Talisman sect's sound-transmitting magical tool, he was slightly relieved. Li Mu did not hide from Huan Ji. After activating the artifact, he asked, "Senior brother, what is it?" Xian Jizi's voice was serious. "Junior brother, do you have 7 heart flowers and profound heart grass that are over 500 years old?" 7 heart flowers and profound heart grass were not particularly precious spiritual herbs, But anything over 500 years old, even if it was just a stalk of green foxtail grass, was worth a lot. In Li Mu's memory, there was only one kind of pill that required both of these herbs. It was a type of pill called demon suppression pill. It was used by cultivators to suppress their inner demons. Li Mu asked, "What happened?" Xian Jizi said with a heavy tone, "A grand elder of the spirit array sect failed to break through and was invaded by his inner demons. It affected his mind and almost caused a disaster. Fortunately, the sect master and another grand elder were at the sect at the time. Using the mountain protecting formation, they worked together to control him. However, they also suffered heavy injuries. The people of the Spirit Array sect came to the Pill Cauldron sect to ask for a demon suppression pill. The Pill Cauldron sect lacks these two herbs." Li Mu understood the demon suppression pill, so he was very clear that the key to this matter was not the 7 heart flowers and profound heart grass. Although the demon suppression pill could be at least a mystic level pill, the demon suppression pill needed to be at least a saint level pill to be effective on a grand elder of the Spirit Array sect in the 7th realm. Refining a saint level pill was as difficult as writing a saint level fulu. Not to mention the Pill Cauldron sect, even Li Mu himself might not be able to refine it. He could only say to Xian Jizi, "I'll try my best to find it." Li Mu and Illusion Princess searched through the treasury of the Thousand Fox Nation and Illusion Princess's personal treasury. They found many 7 heart flowers and profound heart grass, but they were far less than 500 years old. Spirit herbs that were over 100 years old would emit dense spirit chi and attract cultivators, monsters, and even wild beasts. Spirit herbs that were over 100 years old were rarely found in the wild unless they were cultivated by a family or faction with hundreds or thousands of years of history. Illusion Princess thought for a moment and said, "The Thousand Fox Nation doesn't have them, but that doesn't mean the Tianlang Nation and the Black Snake Nation and Flying Bear Tribe don't have them. I'll have Hu Jiao go to their territory and ask." The Tianlang Nation and the Thousand Fox Nation had great enmity. The Black Snake Nation and the Flying Bear Tribe had no relationship with the Thousand Fox Nation. Even if they had them, they might not give them to Hu Jiao. Li Mu thought for a moment and said, "Let's go ourselves." Not long after, he brought Illusion Princess, 1 level 7 monster corpse, and 10 level 6 monster corpses to the Tianlang Nation. The Blue Wolf King and the former monster sect Grand Elders' corpses had been refined into monster corpses by Qin Shi and the others. The tiger monster was at the peak of level 6, but after it was refined, its cultivation level remained at the early stage of level 6. In the Tianlang Nation, the Blue Wolf King sat cross-legged in his cave abode, cultivating with his eyes closed. He had lost his physical body in the Battle of the Thousand Fox Nation. Although he had found another one later, it was impossible for him to recover his strength within 10 years. Therefore, he had warned the Sirius clan and their subordinate demon clans to shrink their territory and avoid conflict with the Thousand Fox Nation as much as possible. He no longer dreamed of ruling the monster nation. It was already very difficult for him to keep his current territory. At a certain moment, the Blue Wolf King, who was cultivating in his cave abode, suddenly opened his eyes with an extremely frightened expression. He immediately flew out of his cave abode. Just as he flew into the sky, he saw a dozen streaks of light shooting toward him. It was a powerful aura, mixed with monster chi and corpse chi. One of the corpses was his physical body. The Blue Wolf King's expression changed drastically. He thought that the Thousand Fox Nation had come to exterminate them. Without hesitation, he turned into a streak of light and tried to escape. Without the support of the demon sect, the Tianlang Nation was no match for the Thousand Fox Nation. That human must have brought so many demonic corpses with him to kill him. The Green Wolf King didn't have any fighting spirit, but just as he was about to flee, the 7th-tier demonic corpse had already blocked his path. The other demonic corpses also quickly caught up and surrounded him. The Blue Wolf King had no hope of escaping. He looked at Li Mu and Illusion Princess with grief and indignation. He said, "My tribe has already made concessions. Do you really want to kill us all?" Li Mu only wanted to borrow 2 spirit herbs. Just as he was about to explain his intentions, the Blue Wolf King hesitated for a moment and seemed to have made a big decision. He gritted his teeth and said, From now on, the Tianlang tribe will submit to the Heavenly Fox Nation. This way you will let me go, right? Li Mu and Illusion Princess looked at each other. They could see the shock in each other's eyes. Although the Tianlang tribe was not as powerful as before, they were still one of the 4 major monster tribes. If the Blue Wolf King led the monster kings under him to fight to the death, the Thousand Fox Nation would have to pay a heavy price to exterminate or subdue them. That was why they had not done anything to the Tianlang tribe. This time, they really only came to borrow 2 spirit herbs. They did not expect to receive such an unexpected reward. Li Mu looked at Illusion Princess, and Illusion Princess looked at Li Mu. A cunning look flashed across their eyes. Li Mu's mind moved, and the monster corpses retreated. The Blue Wolf King was overjoyed. You agree? Li Mu looked at him calmly and said, The heavens are benevolent. Since you are willing to submit, I will spare your life today. Chapter 548. Tianlang Kingdom. The Blue Wolf King brought Li Mu and Phantom Princess to the palace. He had already thought things through. Working for the demon sect was the same as working for the Thousand Fox Kingdom. After what happened last time, the demon sect had all fled, leaving him alone to face the powerful Thousand Fox Kingdom. This was enough to prove that the demon sect was not reliable. He might as well submit to the Thousand Fox Kingdom, so that he would not have to worry about this human bringing a group of powerful demon corpses to take his life every day. After thinking this through, the last bit of unhappiness in the Blue Wolf King's heart quickly disappeared without a trace. Inside the palace of Tianlang Kingdom, Li Mu looked at the Blue Wolf King and said, Although you're willing to submit, we can't completely trust you. Hand over a drop of your soul blood. Soul blood was very important to both human and demon cultivators. The Blue Wolf King did not want to hand it over, but a wolf under someone else's roof had to bow. If he did not hand over the soul blood, it would be difficult to resolve the situation today. He hesitated for a moment, but still obediently forced out a drop of soul blood. Li Mu put away the soul blood, then said, One more thing. Do you have 7 heart flowers and mysterious heart grass that are more than 500 years old? The Yao Kingdom was very rich in spiritual herbs. The Blue Wolf King did not recognize the 7 heart flowers and mysterious heart grass, but spiritual herbs that were more than 100 years old could be eaten raw to increase one's spiritual power. He had collected quite a few over the years. After all, he had just submitted. In order to claim credit, he took out all the spiritual herbs in his storage space and said, This is my many years of savings. Sir, please see if you have those 2 spiritual herbs. Li Mu looked at the spiritual herbs, his eyes shining. This old wolf's wealth was too rich. The worst of these spiritual herbs were at least 100 years old, and there was no lack of supreme spiritual herbs that were hundreds of years old. Li Mu waved his sleeve, and the spiritual herbs disappeared. The Blue Wolf King widened his eyes and looked at Li Mu. He opened his mouth and muttered, This? Li Mu waved his hand and said, You don't know how to refine pills or write talismans. Leaving these things with you is purely a waste. I'll help you keep them for the time being. The Green Wolf King was filled with regret now. If he had known that this human was so greedy, he would not have taken out all of his spirit herbs. Now, all of his spirit herbs had been taken away by this human. The day when he could recover his strength was now far away. After taking the Blue Wolf King's savings, Li Mu began to search among the spirit herbs. Very quickly, he found a very strange-looking creature. There were 7 heart-shaped flowers growing on the stem of a certain plant. 6 of them were red, and 1 was pink. Every 100 years, one of the 7 hearts flowers would turn red. 6 red flowers meant that this flower was more than 600 years old. The 7 heart flower had been found, and the mysterious heart grass was also found in the Blue Wolf King. However, its medicinal age was not high enough to be used as an ingredient for saint-grade medicinal pills. Li Mu and Huan Ji could only go to the mysterious snake clan to try their luck. When the Blue Wolf King heard that Li Mu and Huan Ji were going to the mysterious snake clan, he volunteered to go with them. The mysterious snake clan's territory was in a vast swamp basin. This was the best environment for the mysterious heart grass to grow. The entire mysterious snake clan's territory was covered in a layer of purple poisonous fog. Normal monsters would not be able to enter, but to Li Mu's group, this poisonous fog was nothing. The Blue Wolf King took the initiative to show off. Wherever he went, a gust of demonic wind blew away the poisonous fog. He asked, "Are we going to attack the mysterious snake clan?" Li Mu said indifferently, "No, we're going to ask if they have any 500-year-old mysterious heart grass." The Thousand Fox Nation's focus was on development, not expansion. Without the monster corpses, they were not much stronger than the other three clans. They could not take over such a large territory. Oh, the Blue Wolf King flew in front. Li Mu poured a bucket of cold water on him. He felt that something was wrong. He had brought so many people with him. It was enough to destroy the mysterious snake clan, but he was only going to look for herbs. Was he going to the Celestial Wolf Kingdom for herbs too? The more the Blue Wolf King thought about it, the more he felt that it was possible. He asked tentatively, "Then why did you come to the Celestial Wolf Kingdom, my lord?" "Li Mu, I originally came for herbs, but since you're so sincere, I'll take your soul blood while I'm at it." The Blue Wolf King did not speak again. Li Mu noticed that he slapped himself a few times. He probably would not speak casually in the future. The poisonous fog gradually thickened as the three of them flew. They could no longer see the sun when they looked up. Rugged rocks began to appear frequently in the swamp. Some of these rocks were dozens of feet tall, while others were hundreds of feet tall. They emitted a faint demonic aura. The Blue Wolf King was getting impatient. After asking for instructions from Li Mu, he howled to the sky and shouted, "Jiao Tian, come out and see me." His aura spread out, and the low-level snake demons in the rocks nearby trembled. An equally powerful aura burst out from the swamp in front of them. In a dozen breaths of time, it arrived in front of the three of them. A thin man in white floated in the air. When he saw the Blue Wolf King opposite him, as well as Li Mu and Phantom Princess behind him, his eyes narrowed. He said warily, "Blue Wolf, what are you doing here?" Li Mu had a good impression of the Snake Clan. He smiled at the man in white and said, "We're here to ask the Snake King for a 500-year-old mysterious heart grass." The white-robed man didn't believe Li Mu's words at all. The ambitious Blue Wolf King had brought two powerful cultivators here just to ask for a single herb. Who the hell would believe him? This treacherous old wolf must be up to no good. The man in white let out a long howl. In the fog, countless auras closed in. Soon, they surrounded Li Mu, Phantom Princess, and the other two. These people were obviously the strong people of the Snake Clan. Their eyes shone fiercely. Among these auras, there were 2 6th-level auras and more than 10 5th-level auras. The man in white looked at the Blue Wolf King and said coldly, "Get out. Otherwise, don't blame me for being rude. You're not my match now." This time, to show his goodwill, Li Mu kept the spirit corpses in his cave abode. However, in this situation, a battle could break out at any moment. Even if the Snake Clan had the mysterious heart grass, they would not give it to him. Therefore, Li Mu summoned all the spirit corpses. 1 7th level and 10 6th level. The aura of the Snake Clan was instantly suppressed. Li Mu looked at the Nine Heavens Snake King and repeated, "We're here to ask the Snake King for a 500-year-old mysterious heart grass. We can also exchange for it with other spirit herbs of equal value." The Nine Heavens Snake King thought for a moment and slowly reached out his hand. A white light flashed in his palm and a plant with a long leaf floated in his hand. The plant slowly flew towards Li Mu. The Nine Heavens Snake King said, "There's no need to exchange. You're a guest from afar. This mysterious heart grass is for you." Li Mu accepted the spirit herb and cupped his hands. "Thank you, Snake King." Then he waved his hand and a jade slip flew towards the Nine Heavens Snake King. Seeing the group leave, a snake demon flew over and said in shock, "That seems to be the Queen of Thousand Fox Country, Phantom Princess, and the State Preceptor of Thousand Fox Country. The Fox Clan and the Wolf Clan are mortal enemies. Why are they with the Blue Wolf King?" The Nine Heavens Snake King looked in front of him in shock. He used his divine sense to check the jade slip and found that it recorded a Snake Clan divine ability that even he didn't know about. Although it wasn't very powerful, it was more than enough to exchange for a spirit herb. At this moment he was full of questions. These people were really here to ask for spirit herbs. Why was the Blue Wolf king with the people of Thousand Fox Country? The strength of Thousand Fox Country was far beyond his imagination. Even without the appearance of the 10,000 Illusion Lord and Huan Yun, they already had the strength to annihilate the Snake Clan. While the Nine Heavens Snake King was still on tenterhooks, Li Mu had already sent Phantom Princess back to Thousand Fox Country and rushed back to Mount Jihua as fast as he could. Pill Cauldron Sect. After Xian Jizi put down the sound transmission Dharma artifact, he sighed and said to Wu Chenzi, "Junior brother has found the 7-heart flower and mysterious heart grass. He's on his way here." Guang Qingzi's face lit up. He said, "Martial uncle can be saved." Only Wu Chenzi was still worried. Even the great elder of the Pill Cauldron sect, who was the strongest in alchemy, had a pitifully low success rate in refining a saint-grade pill. It was already considered lucky if he could refine 1 out of 10 sets of materials. This time, there was only 1 set of materials to refine the demon-subduing pill. If he failed, there would be no more chances. He looked at Guang Qingzi and said, "The Pill Cauldron sect once stored 2 saint-grade demon-subduing pills. One was used by the Great Elder a long time ago, and the other was given to Xuanzong. You can go to Xuanzong and ask. Xuanzong hasn't had any elders break through in recent years, so their pill should still be intact." Hearing this, Guang Qingzi immediately contacted the Spirit Array sect. Not long after, he received news that Xuanzong's demon-subduing pill had been used. Wu Chenzi didn't say anything, but Guang Qingzi sensed her strangeness. He asked, "Senior sister, is there something wrong with this?" Wu Chenzi shook her head and said, "The demon-subduing pill is only used when one fails to break through, their spiritual power reverses, and their violent emotions suppress their rationality. Xuanzong hasn't had any elders break through in recent years." Guang Qingzi understood what she meant. He bowed to Wu Chenzi and said, "Please, senior sister." Xuanzong. Dao Qingzi sat cross-legged on a futon with a pill floating in his hand. If it wasn't for the Spirit Array sect's reminder, he wouldn't even know that the sect had a saint-grade demon-subduing pill. He didn't hesitate to swallow the pill. After refining it, he impatiently scanned his body with his divine sense. After a long time, he retracted his divine sense and let out a long sigh. At this moment, a voice sounded in his mind. "What are you looking for? Do you need my help?" Chapter 549. Mount Jihua. Li Mu hurried to Pill Cauldron School and handed the 7-heart flower and heavenly will grass to Wu Chenzi. Guang Yuanzi of Spirit Formation School clasped his fist and said, "Thank you, junior brother. Spirit Formation School owes you a favor." Li Mu waved his hand and said, "It's my duty, senior brother doesn't need to be so polite." Then she looked at Wu Chenzi and asked, "How confident are you in refining this pill, senior sister?" Wu Chenzi shook his head and said, "Even a grand elder wouldn't have a 10% chance of success." A 10% chance was almost zero. Li Mu thought about it and asked again, "What will happen if the refinement fails?" His question caused everyone to fall into silence. A 7th realm cultivator who failed to break through would have their mind taken over by the negative emotions of violence and killing. This was the most terrifying heart demon a cultivator would encounter. If these negative emotions couldn't be removed, the only way was to kill the demonized cultivator to prevent them from harming the world and causing even more serious consequences. A grand elder sacrificing his entire life for the school only to end up with such a tragic ending. It was hard to accept. Li Mu thought for a moment and said, "Why don't I have a try?" Wu Chenzi was shocked. "You?" Xian Jizi walked forward and explained, "Junior brother has a rare 7 orifices heart. Fulu School's Saint Rank Fulu was drawn with his help. If he participates in the refinement of the demon-subduing pill, it might increase the chance of success." 7 orifices heart. Wu Chenzi finally understood why the Talisman Puppet sect valued Ling Jizi so much. The heart of 7 orifices might not have an advantage over other physiques in terms of cultivation, but in terms of writing talismans, it had an advantage that no other physique possessed. Their hearts had 6 more orifices than others. They were born to be emotionless machines for refining pills and talisman writing. Wu Chenzi quickly understood Xian Jizi's meaning and said, "You mean, during the refinement, we can use his body to borrow our Yuan Shun, Xianjizi nodded and said, "There's no better way than this." Not long after Wu Chunzi left the Dao Palace, he returned with two old women. She looked at Li Mu and said, "Junior brother, these two are the grand elders of my Dan Cauldron sect. Their attainments in alchemy are unparalleled in the world. You can choose one of their primordial spirits to possess you." Li Mu looked at the two grand elders and decisively looked away. He said, "I have a better candidate in mind, so I won't trouble the grand elders." Wu Chunzi looked at Li Mu's departing figure and suddenly said to Guang Yuanzi, "Junior brother Ling Jizi wants to open a market in the Great Zhou's divine capital. The Alchemy Cauldron faction has already agreed to settle in the Alchemy Cauldron pavilion there. If junior brother Ling Jizi can refine the demon-subduing pill, your Spirit Array faction will owe him a big favor. I'm afraid you'll have to do something." Guang Yuanzi was silent for a moment before he said, "Senior sister, don't worry. Regardless of whether the evil-subduing pill can be refined successfully, the Danding sect will repay junior brother Ling Jizi." Half a month later, in the Great Zhou's divine capital, the clear sky above the divine capital was suddenly filled with dark clouds. Lightning flashed within the dark clouds. To the people of the divine capital, this kind of weather was no stranger. They only looked up and continued with their own business. Several figures rushed into the clouds. Soon, the dark clouds completely dissipated, revealing the clear sky once again. In the palace, Li Mu personally handed a green pill to Guang Yuanzi. Guang Yuanzi was excited and said, "Thank you, junior brother Ling Jizi." "Thank you, Empress of the Great Zhou." Li Mu smiled and said, "You're welcome. Quickly give it to the grand elders." He had never refined a saint-grade pill before, so he first used a few heaven-grade pills to practice. After all, there was only one set of ingredients, so he couldn't afford to waste them. As a result, although it took a long time, there weren't any problems in the process of refining the evil-subduing pill. While he and the Empress were refining pills day and night, the Spirit Array sect had already set up shop in the market. Not only that, they also helped Li Mu rope in some sects and families of the Jing state. In addition to the sects and families of the Danding Pavilion and the state of Liang, as well as the Fulu School and the Great Zhou Court, they could already support a market. The market hadn't opened yet, but all the major shops had already started pre-sale promotions. There were all kinds of promotions and rebates. Every day, there would be free lectures from experts of the Fulu School, the Danding sect, the Spirit Array sect, and the Great Zhou Court. In a short time, it attracted countless cultivators from the central region. Xuanzong. The Great Zhou Court had completely fallen out with Xuanzong. In order to prevent the Great Zhou Court from doing anything harmful to Xuanzong, Dao Chengzi ordered his disciples to closely monitor every move of the Great Zhou Court. Naturally, the busy construction of the market outside the fairy's capital could not escape their eyes. Dao Chengzi tapped the armrest of his chair with his index finger. "Do they want to imitate me, Xuanzong?" Miao Xuanzi said, "Master, our sex exchange meeting is about to end. The Great Zhou Court's move is obviously to attract cultivators from the Zhu continent. According to my investigation, the Fulu School, the Danding sect, the Spirit Array sect, and some other sects and families have already set up shop in the market of the Great Zhou's divine capital. When the exchange meeting ends, the cultivators of the Zhu continent will probably gather in the divine capital." Dao Chengzi frowned. The Danding sect and the Spirit Array sect are on the same side as the Fulu School, Miao Xuanzi said. The Danding sect's Jade Sun reached the 7th realm a few days ago and became the Fulu School's Dao companion. It's not strange that the Danding sect and the Fulu School are on the same side. The Spirit Array sect's request for a pill failed last time. I'm afraid they're already dissatisfied with me, Xuanzong. He looked at Dao Chengzi and said, "Master, we can't let others take advantage of the market." As the Grand Elder of Xuanzong, Dao Chengzi naturally knew the use of a cultivation market. Xuanzong's market only opened once every 5 years for a month each time. However, the spiritual jades and other cultivation resources that Xuanzong harvested during this month were enough to satisfy the cultivation needs of all the disciples in the sect for 5 years. Dao Chengzi snorted. "They're trying to steal my Xuanzong's business. They've got a good plan." Miao Xuanzi said, "We can't let the Zhou Imperial Court take advantage of us. Dao Chengzi thought for a moment and said, "Pass down my order. From today onwards, the sect's market will always be open. The spiritual jades that the sect takes from the shops will be reduced by 10%. Xuanzong's month-long exchange meeting was about to end. According to past practice, the market would be closed until it reopened 5 years later. Most of the stalls and shop owners had already started packing up and were preparing to leave. However, very soon, the Xianzong announced that even though the social gathering had ended, the market within the sect would continue to be open. Furthermore, from today onwards, the Xianzong would deduct 10% of the profits from all the shops and stalls. As soon as these two pieces of news spread out, it caused a huge commotion. The cultivators who were ready to leave were in no hurry to go back. They planned to stay in Xuanzong for a long time. Not only could they exchange for cultivation resources, but they could also listen to Xuanzong's lectures. How could there be such a good deal in the past? Of course, there were also some rumors that spread among the cultivators. Have you heard? A market has also opened in Jianghu of Great Zhou. I've heard that the Great Zhou court treats all the shops and independent cultivators equally. They only take 10% of the spiritual jades. Moreover, the shops there have already been built. Merchants can stay in them for free. Only 10% and stay in them for free? Isn't that more generous than Xuanzong? Xuanzong takes 30 to 40% of our profits, and we still have to charge them for using their shops. Why don't we go to Jianghu of Great Zhou? The commission is lower there, and the location is excellent. I'm sure there will be more customers. It's said that there are experts from various sects who preach every day. Xuanzong is the biggest sect in Taoism. They're too greedy. In the Taoist palace, Dao Chengzi's face was a little dark. Even though Xuanzong had opened up the market and reduced the commission of spiritual jades, independent cultivators, merchants, and cultivators attending the exchange were still leaving in large numbers. It was obvious that someone was fanning the flames. However, when Xuanzong wanted to investigate, the market in Zhou's Jianghu had already been discussed by everyone. Within 2 days, 30% of the shops and stalls in the market had been emptied. When it came to the market, Xuanzong was already at a disadvantage compared to Zhou's Jianghu. Xuanzong was far away in the East Sea. Its geographical location was not good, but Jianghu was in the center of the Zhou continent. It had a unique advantage. Once the market in Jianghu was established, who would be willing to come to Xuanzong? Dao Chengzi thought for a moment and gritted his teeth. Reduce the spiritual jades taken by the sect by another 10%. Jianghu, Chang'e Palace. Under Li Mu's supervision, the empress was practicing her art Dao to increase her strength. Li Mu was holding a simple and unadorned book that had mysterious runes written on it. In fact, as long as a market was established in Jianghu, Xuanzong would not be able to do business. The geographical disadvantage could not be remedied by reducing the commission. Even if Xuanzong reduced the commission to the same level as the imperial court, or even provided a place for free, their business would still not be good if there were no customers. Without the market, Xuanzong would be able to obtain at least 70% of the cultivation resources. Since Xuanzong wanted to save face, he would make them lose face as well. After learning dragon language from Chengxian for a long time, Li Mu could now somewhat understand the Dragon King's diary. The contents of the diary were more exciting than he had imagined. This lustful dragon had slept with hundreds of races in the 10 continents. Li Mu was engrossed in the diary. Mr. Mei walked in from outside and said that someone was looking for him in the worship department. Li Mu put away the diary and went to the worship department. At the entrance, he saw the successor of Moism.